Chapter 1286. In the 6 Paths of Reincarnation, the reincarnation of the human path finally caused a crack to appear in Jun Wuxian's iron-like state of mind. He didn't know what was going on. He had fallen into the 6 Paths of Reincarnation inexplicably. Every reincarnation was extremely real. All kinds of memories and emotions impacted his state of mind. 1 reincarnation, 2 reincarnations, 9 reincarnations and 10 reincarnations. Facing these reincarnations, Jun Wuxian's mind was like a thread. No matter how the memories impacted him, he couldn't break through. He was Jun Wuxian. Jun Wuxian was the strongest among all the previous masters of the Elysium. Other than the few ancestors who had founded the Elysium and the Elysium sect master, no one else could compare to him. It was said that experts were lonely, but Jun Wuxian had cultivated to this level when there were not many warriors of the same level as him in the lower world. One could imagine how tough his mind was. If it was said that Chu Xiu was able to hold on in this reincarnation by relying on his own willpower and enlightenment, then Jun Wuxian was purely holding on. At this time, the reincarnation had been carried out more than 20 times, and Chu Xiu was almost unable to hold on. He couldn't clearly feel Jun Wuxian's state. After all, it was the separation matrix that transmitted the power of the primordial spirit, so the speed of the consumption of the primordial spirit was faster than under normal circumstances when he used the 6 Paths of Reincarnation bracelet. Now he was at his limit. If this continued, Jun Wuxian's primordial spirit might not collapse, but he would face a backlash. When his primordial spirit was about to be exhausted, Chu Xiu had to put away the 6 Paths of Reincarnation bracelet. He didn't know the situation on the other side. He didn't know what state Jun Wuxian was in after more than 20 reincarnations. But it didn't matter. Chu Xiu still had a spy in the Elysium. When the time came, he could find out more information. At this time in the lower world, when Jun Wuxian left the more than 20 reincarnations, his mind was already in a trance. In the 6 Paths of Reincarnation, no matter how strong your strength was, it was useless. This kind of power tempered your state of mind and your willpower. Although Jun Wuxian had pulled through, his condition was not very good. Most importantly, he was still giving his all to the array formation, but his consciousness was still in a trance. As for Chu Xiu, he had already stopped absorbing the Yuan Qi, and the array formation had already calmed down. Therefore, in the lower realm, the power condensed in the formation had already begun to overflow. Feeling the wave of power, Jun Wuxian seemed to come back to his senses a little, but it was already too late. Damn it. The next moment, a powerful force suddenly erupted, and Jun Wuxian was directly blasted out of his main hall by the force of the explosion of the matrix. Even the entire Kunlun mountain range where the Gate of Heaven was located made a huge tremor, and an avalanche occurred in an instant. At this time, the other god generals had already calmed down the formation. When they saw Jun Wuxian's appearance, they immediately rushed over to check on the situation. When they saw Jun Wuxian covered in blood, everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. In their eyes, Jun Wuxian was a godlike existence. But why was their god in such a wretched state? All of you get back. Jun Wuxian roared. Everyone was stunned for a moment, but in the next moment, no one dared to stay, and they all returned to their own main hall. In front of Jun Wuxian, no one dared to disobey his orders. Clutching his chest, Jun Wuxian spat out another mouthful of blood. Since the last time he left the Gate of Heaven, he had been recuperating. First, he was injured by Zhong Xinxiu, but fortunately it was not too serious. In the end, just as he recovered, he was injured by the mark left by Dugu Weiwei. It took a few years for him to return to his peak. He did not expect that the injury this time would be even more serious, and even hurt his foundation. When Zhong Xinxiu said that he could not leave the Gate of Heaven for 300 years, he thought it was a kind of restriction, but now it seemed that it was a warning. Jun Wuxian looked at his main hall, and there was a trace of fear in his eyes. This time he was inexplicably injured. It was definitely not because of qi deviation, but because there was a change in the array formation. This kind of unknown change caused a layer of haze to appear in his heart. At that moment, on the other side of the Dalu Ocean, Chu Xiu had finished absorbing the energy. Furthermore, he had also recovered the power of his primordial spirit to its peak. However, he did not stay in the array formation for too long. The others should have finished absorbing the energy. If he stayed for too long, he might arouse suspicion. Sure enough, when Chu Xiu came out, the others were already waiting for him. After refining the power of the Dalu Ocean Divine Palace, everyone's strength had increased greatly. Of the remaining 5, Fang Yizhen and Ouyang Sheng had reached the first martial immortal realm, while Su Guishan and Fa Jing had reached the third martial immortal realm. The most surprising was Yi Guixia. He had also reached the third martial immortal realm. Of course, the crowd was only slightly surprised but did not think too much about it. Wuxia was already a half-step martial immortal. Having stayed in that realm for so long, he must have accumulated a terrifying amount of power. Little did they know, after Chu Xiu came out, the others were even more surprised. The reason for that was because Chu Xiu had actually reached the second martial immortal realm. One must know that how long had it been since Chu Xiu became a half-step martial immortal? In fact, it had only been a few years since he became a profound understanding cultivator. How much power could he have accumulated? He had actually directly surpassed two heavens. Could it be that the power of the array formation in the center was truly that astonishing? The crowd did not think too much about it. Regardless of whether they had any grudges against one another, they all congratulated one another. The path of martial cultivation was a long and arduous one. While they might have grudges against one another, they were all on the same path at that moment. At that moment, the Tao Exalted's voice sounded in the crowd's ears. Congratulations on becoming a martial immortal. You are now able to stand at the peak of the heaven realm and control yourselves. The entrance to the formation has been opened. You may all leave now. Following the Tao Exalted's voice, a formation entrance appeared before them. Chu Xiu and the others stepped into it. When they reappeared, they were already outside the central province. In the eastern region, the people from the High Heaven sect and the Royal Sky Pavilion, as well as Lu Fengxian and the others were all there. Most importantly, Wuxia was there too. Furthermore, the power that he was releasing was shockingly in the martial immortal realm. In fact, Wuxia had already attracted a lot of attention when he came out of the central province. The situation in the central province was special. Regardless of one's strength, as long as one did not die after entering the central province, one would be able to reap some benefits. As such, it was normal for true fire and spirit refinement cultivators to enter and profound understanding cultivators to come out. It was also normal for half-step martial immortals to enter and profound understanding cultivators to come out. However, without entering the Daluo Divine Palace, Wuxia entered with profound understanding cultivator of heaven and earth and came out with martial immortal cultivation. That was rather shocking. However, Chu Xiu was mentally prepared. Ning Xuanji had told him that as long as Old Man Wei survived this trial, there would be a fortuitous encounter for him. Although Ning Xuanji did not say what this fortuitous encounter was, it was obvious that with Ning Xuanji's strength and identity, advancing from profound understanding cultivator of heaven and earth to half-step martial immortal was not considered a fortuitous encounter. At this moment, Wuxia's emotions were also very excited and complicated. He did not expect to run into a legendary existence like Ning Xuanji. However, by the time he woke up, his impression of Ning Xuanji had been completely shattered. Although Ning Xuanji was supposed to be an enemy of the demonic sect, he still could not bear it. The legendary immortal Ning Xuanji, who was famous in the lower realm, turned out to be an old Taoist priest who spoke vulgarities. Chu Xiu greeted everyone. Although they still had a lot to say, some things involved Ning Xuanji and some secrets. It was clearly not appropriate to talk about them here. Lu Sanjin and the others from the Royal Sky Pavilion also came over to congratulate Chu Xiu. TSK, comparisons are really odious. We're all participating in the competition for the Daluo Divine Palace, but I've basically been enjoying the scenery along the way. Lu Sanjin's tone was filled with envy. Chu Xiu had advanced from profound understanding cultivator to second heavenly layer martial immortal, while he had only advanced from early profound understanding cultivator to peak profound understanding cultivator. Envy was a little unnecessary. Chu Xiu's achievements were no longer something he could be envious of, but he was still very envious. This time the Royal Sky Pavilion is actually very lucky. At the very least they didn't suffer any losses. That's very rare. Lu Sanjin curled his lips and said, there are only 2 or 3 of them. They're so cowardly that they don't even dare to enter the center of the central province. If we lose them again we'll be in big trouble. Zhong Qiushui was the one who told Lu Sanjin to hide in the outer region of the central province. She also told him that it was the experience of the predecessors and that it was absolutely safe. Although it was safe, Lu Sanjin was still a cultivator of the younger generation. Although he usually appeared to be indifferent, he was actually quite spirited. It was not easy to enter the central province, but he didn't even see the shadow of the exalted divine palace. This undoubtedly made him a little unhappy. At this time, several people from the High Heaven sect came over. Elder Wu, who had stopped Chu Xiu from killing Xinyuan Wushuang, came over anxiously and asked, Young Master Chu, did you see Wushuang in the mist? I saw him, Chu Xiu said indifferently. Elder Wu hurriedly asked, Where did Wushuang go in the end? Chu Xiu spread out his hands and said, How would I know? I entered the exalted divine palace in the end, but Xinyuan Wushuang didn't. At this time, another high heaven sect elder came over angrily and said, but someone saw Wushuang with you in the end. He was fighting with 2 prime venerables at that time, and then you killed them. How could you not know where he went? Chu Xiu's eyes turned cold, and a powerful pressure unique to martial immortals spread out from his body. Elder, please watch your attitude. I'm not a member of your high heaven sect. If it weren't for me, that ignorant idiot Xinyuan Wushuang would have been killed by Qin Jiolong and Su Jiang. Now that he can't be found, you're asking me for him? What a joke. I'm not Xinyuan Wushuang's father. Do you think I'll protect him all the way to the exalted divine palace? Chapter 1287. With Chu Xiu's current strength and status, this high heaven sect elder running over and questioning him in such a tone was simply courting death. It was true that Chu Xiu wanted to join forces with high heaven sect, but it didn't mean that he had to lower his voice to high heaven sect. After all, the entire high heaven sect still owed him a favor. Seeing that the atmosphere between the two sides had become tense, Elder Wu hurriedly stepped forward and said, Official Chu, please calm down. Elder Lin didn't mean that. He was just worried about Wushuang. Chu Xiu said indifferently, It's not like you don't know the situation of the Daluo Divine Palace. What's the use of being anxious? Xinyuan Wushuang hasn't come out yet, so I'm afraid he won't be able to come out. Your high heaven sect should have left some kind of mark on Xinyuan Wushuang. Now that you've returned to high heaven sect, maybe you've already found the answer. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Elder Wu and the others had no choice but to leave. Even without mentioning the fact that their high heaven sect still owed Chu Xiu a favor, Chu Xiu had already reached the martial immortal realm and was no longer someone who could be easily questioned. Martial immortals and non-martial immortals were 2 different levels of existence. After exchanging greetings, the group left the central province. On the way, when there was no one else around, Mei Qinglian finally released her curiosity and asked Chu Xiu and Wei Shuya. After Chu Xiu briefly told everyone about Ning Xuanji, it was obvious that they couldn't accept that the legendary immortal Ning Xuanji had such a personality. Mei Qinglian couldn't help but shake her head and sigh. Sure enough, legends can't be trusted. Things from 500 years ago have long changed. Lu Jiang has said disdainfully, the righteous path can't produce anyone at all. That's why they put Ning Xuanji on such a high pedestal. Of course, in other words, the strongest chosen according to their standards doesn't exist at all. Qinqing Di shook his head regretfully after hearing this. What a miscalculation. If I had known that immortal Ning Xuanji was in the Daluo Divine Palace, I would have entered earlier. Chu Xiu also asked curiously, Alliance Master Qin, I didn't see you in the hinterland of the Central Province. What did you do after entering the Central Province? Qinqing Di spread out his hands and said, I just killed demonic ghosts. These fey ghosts weren't hard to kill, but they were hard to deal with. After killing them, I refined their soul crystals. After all, the power of my primordial spirit was also a weakness. As an outsider, I didn't want to enter the Daluo Divine Palace to cultivate, so there was no point in keeping the soul crystals. But who would have thought that the demonic ghosts seemed to have their eyes on me? They followed me wherever I went, and the more I killed, the stronger they became. I've been killing demonic ghosts and refining soul crystals all this time. But then again, this really is a good place. The power of my spirit has skyrocketed several times over. Chu Xiu was a little speechless after listening to Qinqing Di. He finally knew what was going on. Qinqing Di was the same as him. He refined the demonic ghost soul crystals and ended up being haunted by them. The difference was that Chu Xiu didn't continue refining the soul crystals after learning of the news, while Qinqing Di kept refining them, which led to him being besieged by the demonic ghosts. Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Wei Shuya and asked, Elder Wei, what happened back then? Were you sucked into that place as soon as you entered the central province? Wei Shuya smiled bitterly. More or less. I just finished off a few demonic ghosts when I noticed a vortex appearing around me. I thought it was the work of the demonic ghosts, but I didn't expect it to be spatial materialization. After being sucked into the city of tragic deaths, I was immediately besieged by the demonic ghosts and fell into an illusion. If it weren't for Ning Xuanji's voice passing through the illusion and reminding me, I would have been in deep trouble this time. Wei Shuya had mixed feelings about being saved by a great enemy of the Kunlun devil cult. However, it was Lu Jianghe who curled his lips. This matter was caused by that old fellow Ning Xuanji in the first place. The main culprit was him. Wei Shuya changed the topic and said, however, this matter is also an opportunity. The soul crystals of the demonic ghosts not only contain the power of their souls, but they also contain extremely pure vitality. After I survived the illusion, the power in the soul crystals of the demonic ghosts was absorbed into my body without the slightest hindrance. I stepped into the martial immortal realm in one fell swoop. Wei Shuya made it sound easy, but in fact he himself knew the dangers involved. With Wei Shuya's tenacity, he wouldn't be afraid if it was a single demonic ghost. However, it was an illusion formed by dozens of demonic ghosts. Its power was astonishingly powerful. Even with Wei Shuya's current state of mind, he was almost lost in it. He only managed to survive by sheer willpower. After returning to the southern barbaric land, everyone had to discuss matters. Qinqing Di went into closed-door training. He wasn't a blind person. Although he had a good relationship with Chu Xiu and the others, he wasn't Chu Xiu's subordinate after all. It was better not to know some of the secrets of the Kunlun devil cult. After Qinqing Di left, Chu Xiu gathered everyone and told them about the Elysium. If it was before, everyone would definitely think that Chu Xiu was crazy when they heard that Chu Xiu was going to fight with the Elysium. But now they thought that it was normal because the strength of Chu Xiu's subordinates had far surpassed that of the Elysium. The Kunlun devil cult could look down on the other 9 divine generals of the Elysium. The only troublesome one was Jun Wuxian, the unknown master of the Elysium. Wei Shuya stroked the beard on his chin and muttered, "How confident are you?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Excluding Jun Wuxian 100%. But if Jun Wuxian is included, to be honest, I'm not sure either. Apart from the battle with Zhong Xinxiu, Jun Wuxian hasn't really revealed his strength. But I can see that his aura isn't any weaker than Yi Weikong's, so he's at least a 7th heaven martial immortal." Shui Wuli also said that the 7 nailing arrows that Jun Wuxian used to plot against me was something he found at the last minute and learned in a very short period of time. Jun Wuxian's strength is definitely not weak to be able to master a divine power so easily. However, this is also our best chance. In the formation, I've already used the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet to pull his soul into the 6 paths of reincarnation. But his soul was exhausted too much, so I wasn't able to completely defeat him. If we miss this chance, who knows how long we'll have to wait to seriously injure a 7th heaven martial immortal expert. We can't miss this chance. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, everyone present nodded their heads. Even though there were risks in the plan, they were already used to it. When did Chu Xiu's plan not have risks? But in the end, they still won. At that moment, Chu Xiu took out the special soul crystals he obtained from the city of the wronged and distributed them to everyone. These special soul crystals contain extremely pure energy. After refining them, there won't be any backlash or burden. Everyone pick out the attributes that suit you and refine them. Try to push your strength to the peak before attacking the heavenly gates. Among the people present, Wei Shuya was already a martial immortal. Now he only needed to stabilize his foundation of power. Shang Tianliang also obtained a lot of benefits this time. He was only a step away from becoming a martial immortal. Whether or not he could make a breakthrough would depend on luck. Lu Jiang he also gained a lot. Previously, in the city of the wronged, he saw the transformation of the rules of power and had an epiphany, allowing him to step into the half-step martial immortal realm. As for Mei Qinglian and Lu Fengxian, it wouldn't be a problem for them to push their foundation of power forward with the soul crystals. As for whether or not they could take advantage of the opportunity to step into the half-step martial immortal realm, that was an unknown. Chu Wuji could also use the soul crystals to step into the next realm. Furthermore, Chu Wuji's foundation of power was extremely solid, so he wouldn't have to worry about the instability of his realm after making a breakthrough. After the discussion, everyone went into closed-door training. They wanted to push their strength to the next level before attacking the heavenly gates. Chu Xiu didn't have to worry about that. He had already used the power of the Daluo Divine Palace to stabilize his realm. Now he only needed to plan out the details of the attack on the heavenly gates. Inside the secret chamber, Chu Xiu summoned his inner demon. The inner demon hadn't appeared in the central plains because it was useless against the demonic ghosts. The demonic ghosts weren't humans, so the inner demon couldn't invade their minds. Besides, things without intelligence would be useless even if the inner demon managed to invade their minds. But this time, when the inner demon appeared again, it had a solemn look on its face. It sat cross-legged in Chu Xiu's mind as if it was thinking about something. Seeing the inner demon like that, Chu Xiu couldn't help but ask, "Are you thinking about life?" The inner demon actually nodded when it heard Chu Xiu's question. "You're not human, so why are you thinking about life?" The inner demon retorted, "What human? I can think and I have the memories of a human. Apart from the fact that I don't have a body, what's the difference between me and a human?" The demonic ghosts from the Daluo Divine Palace gave me an idea. They don't have bodies, but through the power of laws they can reconstruct their bodies, turning from human to demonic ghosts, and then from demonic ghosts back to human. Since that's the case they can do it, but why can't I? Didn't you say before that you wanted to find a perfect body for me to possess? But now I've suddenly changed my mind. An outsider's body is in the end an outsider's body. My own body is the most suitable for me. How about we make a deal? Why don't you help me reconstruct my body? I know that you've already grasped the demonic path of creation. Furthermore, you've become a martial immortal and grasped the power of laws. To you, that is not something impossible. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin. After pondering for a moment he said, "You're quite creative. However, if that's the case you'll have to wait for a very long time. After all, although I am able to control the demonic path of creation and the power of laws, I do not have complete control over them." The inner demon nodded and said, "I know that. It doesn't matter. I've already waited for 800 years. What's there to wait for? That said, if you're able to enter the primitive demon cave again and bring out another portion of my power, I reckon I'll be even stronger." Chu Xiu sneered, "That place is not that easy to enter. Even if you have the strength, you'll still have to wait for the right opportunity. Enough with the superfluous words. Help me contact Xue Wuli. I want to know the current situation of the heavenly gates." Chapter 1288. In the Gate of Heaven, Xue Wuli went to the elixir hall to receive his share of cultivation elixirs. All the warriors who had participated in the sealing of the Array's rebellion had consumed a lot of their energy, so they needed some elixirs to recover their energy. At this time, Xue Wuli's shoulder was suddenly patted by someone. He shivered and jumped to the side. Lin Songlong, who was also a divine general of the Gate of Heaven, frowned and said, "Xue Wuli, what's wrong? Why do I feel like you're not in your right mind?" Xue Wuli smiled bitterly and said, "We just experienced such a serious Array rebellion, and even the gate master was injured. I'm just a little worried." Lin Songlong waved his hand casually and said, "Don't worry too much. This is very normal. The sealing Array will have a violent rebellion from time to time. This time it was just a little too violent. It's just that you've been like this ever since you came back from outside. Why, did you lose your soul outside?" Xue Wuli forced a smile and said, "Divine General Lin must be joking. I've always been like this. I'll go back first. Because of the Array rebellion, I've consumed a lot of energy. I need to replenish it now." As he spoke, Xue Wuli hurriedly left, leaving Lin Songlong with a baffled look on his face. He muttered, "Could it be that this boy has been mesmerized by the outside world? Newcomers are so ignorant. What's so good about the outside world? How can it be as comfortable as cultivating in the Gate of Heaven?" Lin Songlong was only a little curious about Xue Wuli, but he did not pursue the matter. Although Lin Songlong had previously said that the disturbance of the Array formation was a very normal thing, he knew that it was actually not normal this time. Every time the Array rebellion was violent, Jun Wuxian would be fine. But this time Jun Wuxian had been seriously injured. This was something that had never happened before. Lin Songlong, who regarded Jun Wuxian as a god, was not used to it. Returning to his own hall, Xue Wuli immediately closed the door and let out a long sigh. He thought that his state of mind was very strong, but in reality, he had been cultivating in the Gate of Heaven since he was young. The so-called state of mind was just the willpower that was tempered through fighting. In normal times it was indeed powerful enough, but in times like this, it was clearly not enough. Ever since he had returned from Chu Xiu's place, he had a feeling that he would be exposed at any time and then be tortured by the Elysium's torture, unable to live or die. Ever since that time he had even spent less time sleeping. Most of the time he relied on meditation to recover his energy. Because once he fell asleep he would dream of himself being exposed. Lin Songlong was right. He was indeed distracted. If this continued he would probably go crazy. Xue Wuli even had a very radical idea. He wanted the Elysium to perish as soon as possible. If the Elysium was really destroyed one day he might not have to continue living in fear. At this moment Xue Wuli's head suddenly hurt and a voice appeared in his mind. This caused Xue Wuli to be extremely frightened. But then he realized that this was actually Chu Xiu's voice. Only then did he remember that although Chu Xiu had destroyed the restriction in his mind, Chu Xiu had left something in his mind. It should be that thing that was causing trouble now. Before Xue Wuli could speak, Chu Xiu's voice rang in his ear again. "Time is pressing, don't talk nonsense. I only have one question for you. Jun Wuxian, what's the situation now?" Although Xue Wuli's mind had a part of the power of the inner demon, to directly transmit the voice into Xue Wuli's mind, the amount of mental energy consumed was too shocking. Hence, Chu Xiu could only save some time. Shui Wuli was stunned for a moment, then immediately said, "Master?" Jun Wuxian was injured by the backlash of the formation, and the injury is very serious. The fluctuations have even shaken the entire Kunlun Mountains. Now the master is in seclusion to recover from his injuries, and it is unknown when he will come out. After hearing Shui Wuli's words, Chu Xiu cut off the connection. On Shui Wuli's side, there was a look of contemplation in his eyes. Although there was a general pattern to the formation's backlash, it was only a general pattern. Even the exact year could not be determined. It was possible that there was a difference of 10 or 20 years between them. So how did Chu Xiu know that something had happened to Jun Wuxian? Even if he could feel the tremors from East Kunlun, how could he be sure that it was Jun Wuxian who had an accident? This kind of thing made Shui Wuli have a bold guess, but he only guessed half of it and did not dare to think any further. At that moment, in the Daluotian Mountains, after knowing Jun Wuxian's condition, Chu Xiu had already made preparations to attack the Gate of Heaven. Taking advantage of Jun Wuxian's injury, this was practically the best opportunity for Chu Xiu. If he was unable to destroy the Gate of Heaven this time, it was likely that he would have to wait until he reached the 7th heaven of Martial Immortal for the next time. However, if he were to take action now, Chu Xiu would need to plan more. After all, according to Shui Wuli, the divine generals of the Gate of Heaven were not the only threats in the Gate of Heaven. There were also thousands of martial artists hidden in the secret realm who were being slaughtered by the Gate of Heaven. At that moment, in the lower realm, within the Storm Sword Tomb, a gloomy black fog enveloped the entire Storm Sword Tomb. Broken swords were stuck in the Storm Sword Tomb. Although it was a scene filled with sword qi, it appeared gloomy and dilapidated at that moment. Zhongli Mu sat beside the Storm Sword Tomb. His face was ashen, and it was obvious that he did not have long to live. He was a person from the previous era, a disciple of Sword Emperor Shin Kangwu. Although he did not officially participate in the Great War 500 years ago, he had witnessed the fall of that generation with his own eyes. He had relied on a secret technique to survive for so many years. However, with a single punch from Qinqing Di, his sword heart that he had nurtured for hundreds of years was shattered. Everything was fabricated, everything was a joke. So what if he had lived for hundreds of years? In this world it was not a matter of who lived longer, who was stronger. At that moment, a barefooted young martial artist in white walked behind Zhongli Mu and said softly, "Ancestor, are you looking for me?" The young man was Yan Ji of the Storm Sword Tomb. His appearance had not changed in the slightest from over 10 years ago, but his temperament had become more stable. Moreover, he had also reached the mysterious realm of heaven and earth and had officially taken over the Storm Sword Tomb as its ruler. The Storm Sword Tomb was not so much a sect, but a loose alliance. Therefore there was no sect master or sect master. Every generation, a ruler would be chosen to be responsible for dealing with the outside world. Ever since the Great War on Floating Jade Mountain, Yanji had frequently appeared in the Jianghu. Moreover, his ability and strength were suitable. Naturally, he had taken over the Storm Sword Tomb 2 years ago. Zhongli Mu said indifferently, "I'm going to die." Yanji's expression changed slightly. He quickly said, "Ancestor." Zhongli Mu waved his hand and interrupted Yanji. "Previously, I was able to live after my lifespan was exhausted because I had refined the longevity sword spirit into my body, replacing the vitality in my dantian. However, Qinqingdi's punch had completely shattered it. Therefore, I do not have much time left to live. In this last period of time, I want to give you something." As Zhongli Mu spoke, he formed a seal with his hand. In the entire Storm Sword Tomb, countless swords trembled and let out a drawn-out sword cry. The black fog swirled and finally turned into something that looked like a black dragon. It let out a sword cry that echoed throughout the Storm Sword Tomb. "What is this?" Yanji's face was filled with shock. He could feel that the power emitted from the black dragon was simply shocking. Zhongli Mu said, "This is a sword soul. A sword soul born in the entire Storm Sword Tomb." At this point, Zhongli Mu's tone slowed down. He looked ahead and slowly said, "In the entire Storm Sword Tomb only I know of its existence. Actually, I have a selfish motive. There are countless swords buried in the Storm Sword Tomb. Countless sword spirits dissipate. When they accumulate to a certain extent, they will form a sword soul. However, this process may take hundreds or even thousands of years. Therefore, in the Storm Sword Tomb, there are very few records about sword souls. Even if they appear, the ancestors of the Storm Sword Tomb would not use them. Only my master, the Sword Monarch, Shin Kangwu, created 8,000 sword techniques in his life. In terms of the study of the Sword Dao, even Sword Sengu Qingqing could not compare to my master. He found a way to refine the sword soul and use it. At this point, Zhongli Mu suddenly turned to look at Yanji and said, "But all of this was destroyed by me. After my master passed away, no one in the Storm Sword Tomb knows about this except for me." Yanji was stunned. He wanted to say something, but in the end he swallowed his words. Zhongli Mu laughed at himself and said, "You have guessed it, right? The reason is simple. I have a selfish motive. I want to monopolize the Sword Soul and reach the legendary realm, the realm that even my master could not reach. Therefore, I did not choose to die in the Storm Sword Tomb even though I knew my lifespan was coming to an end. Instead, I chose to refine the longevity sword that has been with me for hundreds of years. I relied on the Sword Spirit's power to live until today. However, fate makes fools of people. I waited for so many years but the Sword Soul could not form. It was only after my Dantian was destroyed by Qinqing Di that the Sword Soul finally formed. Perhaps this is fate. I sacrificed the sword to live. My heart no longer has the spirit of a swordsman. All I have is the greed for life and power. How could someone like me be worthy of the Sword Soul condensed by countless Sword Dao Grandmasters and countless famous swords in the Sword Tomb?" Yanji wanted to say something but Zhongli Mu shook his head and said, "I do not have much time left. You just need to listen. Later I will help you refine the Sword Soul. You may reach the legendary realm. The future of the Storm Sword Tomb is in your hands. I do not know if this is right or wrong but I have no other choice. I only have one request. Bury me next to my master." Chapter 1289. When a person was about to die, they would be able to see through many things. It was a pity that Zhongli Mu had finally seen through all of this, but he no longer had time. However, Yanji was at a loss. This was different from the sword venerable Zhongli Mu in his memories. Although Zhongli Mu often cultivated in seclusion, he would give guidance to his disciples as soon as he came out. How could the founder of their Wind Cloud Sword Tomb be such a selfish person? But now that Zhongli Mu had personally told him about it, Yanji didn't know how to respond to it. Zhongli Mu said in a low voice, "I don't have much time. Sit down and calm your mind. Empty your Dantian and transfer all of your power to your meridians. Then recite this mantra." With that, Zhongli Mu pointed at Yanji's forehead. His entire body was instantly enveloped by sword aura. Yanji could not refuse. He did not even have time to think. He could only subconsciously follow Zhongli Mu's instructions. In the next moment, Zhongli Mu waved his hand. The black dragon formed by the Sword Soul struggled, but it was enveloped by boundless sword aura and entered Yanji's body. In that instant, Zhongli Mu seemed to have aged a few decades. His hair and beard were all white, the color of decay. However, the sword aura in his hand did not relax at all. It forcefully suppressed the Sword Soul and helped Yanji fuse with it. In an instant, the power around Yanji's body reached its peak. Cracks appeared all over his body as if his entire body was about to explode. Seeing this, Zhongli Mu waved his hand. His primordial spirit burned with golden light. He erupted with the last bit of power and finally suppressed the backlash. In the next moment, sword aura around Yanji soared into the sky. The astonishing sword aura had even reached the level of disrupting the laws, tearing the heavens and splitting the earth. Seeing this, a hint of a smile appeared in Zhongli Mu's rotten and turbid eyes. The pinnacle of martial arts, an immortal of the sword. That was a level that even his teacher hadn't been able to reach. Maybe Sword Saint Gu Qingqing had been able to reach that level 500 years ago, but when he was young he challenged Lonely Onlywa and died. Shen Kengwu had studied the method to refine sword souls for his entire life, but he was born at the wrong time. Zhongli Mu had waited his entire life, but in the end his opportunity never came. But now before he died he finally saw it. The gap between man and nature, the legendary bottleneck of martial immortal, had been broken by his own hands. After a long while, when Yanji had calmed the violent energy in his body and opened his eyes again, he saw Zhongli Mu, who was already at the end of his rope. Ancestral Master. Zhongli Mu looked at Yanji and smiled. He pointed at his chest but he didn't say anything. In the next moment he was no longer breathing. The next moment he was already dead. Yanji hugged Zhongli Mu's corpse and roared. Sword Chi soared into the sky. He didn't care whether Zhongli Mu was a selfish person or not. After so many years, he had sincerely thought about the prosperity of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. Every time he came out of seclusion, he would use a small amount of time to give pointers to the younger generation. In fact, what he used up was his lifespan. If he had remained in secluded cultivation, he might have lived for a few more decades until the birth of a sword soul. Yanji removed Zhongli Mu's hand from his chest and said in a deep voice, "Ancestral Master, I know what you mean. My Wind Cloud Sword Tomb rarely takes the initiative to attack, but we will not let go of the humiliation we received. World Alliance's Qinqing Di. This time I will let him know whether his fist is stronger, or my Wind Cloud Sword Tomb sword is sharper. In the past, Qinqing Di destroyed Wind Cloud Sword Tomb's formation with one punch, and heavily injured Wind Cloud Sword Tomb's ancestor Zhongli Mu with the second punch. This matter was seen as a humiliation for Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. Since then, no one from Wind Cloud Sword Tomb stepped into the martial world for more than a year because it was shameful. Zhongli Mu could not seek revenge from Qinqing Di, so he would personally seek revenge from Qinqing Di. However, Yanji did not know that he had completely misunderstood Zhongli Mu's intentions. When he had just been defeated by Emperor Qinqing Di, Zhongli Mu had indeed been unwilling and resentful. However, it was also because of Qinqing Di's punch that Zhongli Mu completely thought things through and untied the knot in his heart at the same time. He pointed to his chest, not because he wanted Yanji to help him take revenge, but because he wanted Yanji to stay true to his heart and not be affected by external things and emotions like him, losing his nature as a swordsman. In the end, he did not expect that because he died too quickly he could not say what he should have said, and actually caused Yanji to misunderstand. Carrying Zhongli Mu's corpse, Yanji left the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. There were already many Wind Cloud Sword Tomb martialists gathered outside. After all, the fluctuations just now were too terrifying. That powerful sword chi that could tear the laws was something they had never seen before. Looking at Zhongli Mu's corpse, everyone's eyes were filled with grief, but they were not surprised. After all, Zhongli Mu was someone who had lived for close to 500 years. Excluding a monster like the old Celestial Master, he was practically the longest living martialist in the underworld. Ever since he was severely injured by Qinqing Di's punch, Zhongli Mu did not continue to cultivate in seclusion. To him, seclusion was useless at that time. His vitality was being consumed at every moment. Therefore, from then on, the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb martialists were already prepared for the news that Zhongli Mu could pass away at any time. Looking at the crowd below, Yanji said in a deep voice, "In a month, we will attack the World Alliance. Wind Cloud Sword Tomb can only take back what we have lost with our own swords." The eyes of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb martialists below all bloomed with intense sharpness. Although Wind Cloud Sword Tomb had always been low-key, in reality, the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb martialists were more arrogant than anyone else. It was the same even when they looked at the other major sword sections. Sword King City? A bunch of ignorant people who only treated the sword as a pure killing weapon. Forgetting the sword hut? They had some foundation, but they did not have the sharpness of a swordsman. They were too useless. Yanu Palace? Women were not worthy of respect. Hidden Sword Villa? Trash. Wind Cloud Sword Tomb had never claimed to be the leader of the 5 major sword sections. Even when Sword Sovereign Shin Kangwu was around, they did not call themselves that. However, it was obvious that even if Wind Cloud Sword Tomb did not regard themselves as the leader of the 5 major sword sects, they still regarded themselves as the path of return for the Sword Dao. Now that they were smashed by Qinqing Di's punch, even their pride was completely shattered. This was what they had lost. Now they had to rely on themselves to take back what they had lost. A month later, when Yanji had slightly stabilized the power of the Sword Soul, he directly led hundreds of Wind Cloud Sword Tomb disciples towards the World Alliance. Wind Cloud Sword Tomb did not conceal their actions. They just led their people and headed straight for the World Alliance. For Wind Cloud Sword Tomb, they did not need to conceal their actions, nor did they need to use any schemes. This was because of Yanji's existence. In this 1 month, of course, Yanji had completely grasped the power of the Sword Soul. Only then did he know exactly how much power he had obtained. At the same time, he also knew exactly how much Zhongli Mu and his master, Shin Kangwu, had sacrificed in order to obtain this power that was beyond the boundaries of heaven and man. In the end, fate made a fool of people. The people who wanted this power the most were all dead. Instead, he who did not know anything from the beginning to the end, unexpectedly obtained this power. In front of the World Alliance's entrance, the martial artists of the World Alliance all had faint confidence and pride on their faces. It was not simply pride, but pride for their identity. As a sect that was born in the wilderness, the World Alliance had suffered a lot of discrimination in the early days. Especially those large sects with deep heritage, they actually looked down on the uncivilized people of the World Alliance. The World Alliance was able to achieve what it was today because of Qinqing Di's pair of iron fists. Not long ago, Qinqing Di fought his way to Wind Cloud Sword Tomb and severely injured Zhongli Mu. This let the entire underworld know that in this world, there was another supreme expert who could influence the entire situation of the underworld. That person's name was Qinqing Di. World Alliance's Qinqing Di. From then on, the World Alliance could be considered to be truly proud and elated. In Qinqing Di's words, the World Alliance does not bully others, but no one should think about bullying the World Alliance. In a large hall of the World Alliance's headquarters, a middle-aged man held a wine jar. He drank while scratching his head, handling the various chores of the World Alliance. He was the World Alliance's Deputy Alliance Master, star-plucking sword Fang Qingting. Fang Qingting was previously an abandoned disciple of the Forgetful Sword Hut. He had offended an important figure in the sect and was chased after. He was accidentally rescued by Qinqing Di, who had yet to establish the World Alliance at that time. He had followed him until now. Originally, the World Alliance did not have a Deputy Alliance Master. However, when Qinqing Di left more than a year ago, he forcefully gave him the position of Deputy Alliance Master and asked him to help manage the World Alliance. The reason was that the entire World Alliance was made up of uncivilized people. Fang Qingting was the only one who came from a large sect and had experience and ability. If not him, who else could he assign to? Although Fang Qingting complained, as long as it was a task given to him by Qinqing Di, he would not reject it. That was because his life was given to him by Qinqing Di. If not for Qinqing Di, he would have been taken back by the people of the Forgetful Sword Hut and crippled of his martial arts. Moreover, although his talent was not bad, it was merely not bad. If he cultivated diligently his entire life, he would have reached the peak of the real pellet state. However, after following Qinqing Di, although Qinqing Di did not teach him martial arts, he taught him many martial arts, allowing him to step into the true fire spiritual cultivation state. Just a month ago, Qinqing Di actually made a trip back and gave him a few things to refine. The power within them was so strong that it was simply unimaginable. It actually loosened the bottleneck that he had not broken through for more than a decade, allowing him to successfully step into the mysterious heaven and earth state. This was a realm that he did not even dare to think about before. A gentleman would die for a bosom friend. Perhaps this was how it felt. Qinqing Di had given him everything. Now, not to mention managing the World Alliance, even if he wanted his life, he was willing to do it. At that moment, a melodious sword chime suddenly came from outside. A voice resounded throughout the entire World Alliance. Qinqing Di, come out and die. Chapter 1290. Ever since the World Alliance was established, it had never been attacked by anyone. It wasn't because the World Alliance was strong, but because it wasn't worth it. The World Alliance was ultimately an unruly gang. Everyone in the West Chu underworld knew that Qinqing Di was a madman. He wouldn't care who dared to provoke him. As long as he set his eyes on you, you wouldn't have an easy time. Therefore, no one would cause trouble for Qinqing Di unless there was an absolute conflict of interest. It wasn't worth it. When Fang Qingting walked out, he was shocked to see Yan Ji leading the people of Windcloud Sword Tomb. Previously, when Qinqing Di heavily injured Zhongli Mu with a punch, Windcloud Sword Tomb didn't cause trouble for the World Alliance again. Fang Qingting thought that the matter was over. He didn't expect them to come looking for trouble again. Most importantly, Fang Qingting had already reached the heaven and earth elemental realm, but he still couldn't see through Yan Ji's cultivation. He clearly remembered that Yan Ji should be in the heaven and earth elemental realm like him, but how did Yan Ji's strength increase so rapidly? Although Fang Qingting was still puzzled, he still stood out and said in a deep voice, Yan Ji, what is the meaning of this? Do you still want to fight with the World Alliance? Yan Ji said indifferently, Emperor Qinqing Di killed my ancestral master and humiliated my Windcloud Sword Tomb. I'm here today to take back what my Windcloud Sword Tomb lost. Where's Qinqing Di? Does he not even have the guts to stand out? Fang Qingting snorted coldly. Yan Ji, don't you distort the truth. The people of the World Alliance never caused trouble. It was your Windcloud Sword Tomb who bullied the weak and touched the young master of the World Alliance. That's why the Alliance Master attacked. Back when the Alliance Master had attacked Zhongli Mu, he hadn't killed him because he was too old. Now that he's dead, you want to blame it on the Alliance Master? Why don't you say that the person who killed him was someone from a few hundred years ago? Although Fang Qingting used to be from a respectable sect, he had mingled with the World Alliance for a long time, so he was very good with words. At the very least, Yan Ji could not win against him in an argument. Therefore, Yan Ji waved his hand and said in a deep voice, I'm not here to reason with you today. I've said it before. Let Qinqing Di come out and die. If he wasn't here, he would kill his disciple. If his disciple wasn't here, I would destroy the entire Heaven Alliance. I don't believe that Qinqing Di will just sit back and watch as his foundation is destroyed. As Yan Ji's voice fell, a blurry black dragon behind him roared with a shocking sword intent. causing the void to tremble. Fang Qingting's expression suddenly changed, but before he could say anything, Yanji had already waved his hand and shouted, "Kill!" Just as he said before, he was not here to reason with Fang Qingting. He had already blamed Zhongli Mu's death on Qinqing Di. He had even misunderstood Zhongli Mu's intentions, so he had to kill Qinqing Di to take revenge. Since Qinqing Di wasn't here, he would destroy the Heaven Alliance first. In fact, even Yanji himself did not realize that ever since he merged with the Sword Soul, Yanji's personality had become extremely cold and arrogant. In the past, Yanji's personality was actually not that strong. However, now that he was going to destroy the entire Heaven Alliance just to find Qinqing Di, he did not feel the slightest burden or pressure in his heart. Fang Qingting's eyes were filled with despair as he watched the people from Windcloud Sword Tomb make their move. He was very clear about the Heaven Alliance's strength. Apart from Emperor Qinqing, there was also him who had been brought up by Emperor Qinqing all the way. In fact, there were not many experts. After all, the Heaven Alliance had only been around for a short period of time. They were born in the wilderness, so the gap in their foundation was a big problem. If he did not include Qinqing Di, how could he defeat the cultivators from Windcloud Sword Tomb? Therefore, Fang Qingting instantly made a decision. He shouted at the people behind him, "Run! Run to the Kunlun Devil Cult's branch in the southern barbarian land and ask for help." He did not know where Qinqing Di went. He only knew that Qinqing Di had a very close relationship with the leader of the Kunlun Devil Cult, Chu Xiu. Furthermore, Chu Xiu was good friends with their young master, Xie Xiaolu. In the current world, only the Kunlun Devil Cult was not afraid of Windcloud Sword Tomb and was still willing to protect the Heaven Alliance. However, even if the other people from the Heaven Alliance escaped, Fang Qingting could not. If he escaped, how could he be worthy of Qinqing Di's kindness? How could he be worthy of the Heaven Alliance? Fang Qingting unsheathed the sword in his hand and stabbed out. The light of the stars, the sun, and the moon were all overshadowed by the sharpness of his sword. It was extremely dazzling. Yanji raised his eyebrows and said, "Forgetting Sword Hut's lunisolar and galaxy sword technique? Unfortunately, although your strength is not bad, you are not a qualified swordsman. Swords should not be used like this. What's the point of making so many fancy things?" Yanji did not have a sword in his hand, but he only pointed his finger lightly, and the light gathered by Fang Qingting's sword had already exploded. Fang Qingting immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. In front of a martial immortal, even the Elysium was as weak as an ant. Yanji walked forward and looked down at Fang Qingting, who was lying on the ground. He said calmly, "I only want to avenge my ancestor. I don't want to kill the innocent. Tell me where Qinqing Di is. If you can live, the people of the Heaven Alliance can also live." Fang Qingting spat out a mouthful of spittle mixed with blood at Yanji. He cursed, F***CKU, Pucci. A soft sound rang out, and Fang Qingting's forehead was directly pierced by a sword aura. Stubborn fool. At this moment, a martial artist from Windcloud Sword Tomb walked over and said in a low voice, "Sir, there are too many people from the Heaven Alliance. They only want to escape. We only killed 30% of them and we can't catch up with the rest. These people are all fleeing towards the south. They should be heading towards the Kunlun Devil Cult's branch in the southern barbarian land. Should we still chase after them?" Yanji frowned slightly. Kunlun Devil Cult? Chu Xiu? Actually, the hatred between Windcloud Sword Tomb and Kunlun Devil Cult was not that big. One of the reasons was that Windcloud Sword Tomb was very low profile. Most of the martial artists cultivated in the Sword Tomb and would not step out of the pugilistic world. They did not pay much attention to the difference between the righteous and the evil. It was only when Chu Xiu occupied the Kunlun Mountain and wanted to rebuild the Kunlun Devil Cult that Zhongli Mu made a move once. Moreover, ever since Chu Xiu destroyed the Great Light Temple and the Subodhi Monastery, the Kunlun Devil Cult's momentum of dominating the pugilistic world had already begun to show. This caused all the major sects to be extremely vigilant. However, there was still a difference between the Kunlun Devil Cult that Chu Xiu was in charge of and the Kunlun Devil Cult that Dugu Weiwei was in charge of 500 years ago. 500 years ago, Dugu Weiwei's Kunlun Devil Cult was that those who obeyed it would prosper, and those who opposed it would perish. But now, the Kunlun Devil Cult that Chu Xiu was in charge of was not so overbearing, but it began to advance step by step, nibbling away some of the forces in the pugilistic world. Now the entire South China was occupied. Although there were some knowledgeable people who thought that it was necessary to eradicate Chu Xiu as soon as possible. Otherwise, when the Kunlun Devil Cult grew stronger again, there would be endless troubles in the future. But since the destruction of the Buddhism sect, who dared to start another war between the righteous and the evil. Under normal circumstances, Wind Cloud Sword Tomb did not dare and did not want to provoke Chu Xiu. But now, the powerful power brought by the fusion of the Sword Soul gave Yanji confidence. Last time when Chu Xiu destroyed the Subodhi Zen monastery, Yanji was also a spectator. At that time he had already stepped into the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. He also had to admit that in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu was almost invincible. But now he had stepped into another world. Even if it was the Devil Lord Chu Xiu, would he be able to fight? Let's go to South China. Yanji waved his hand and led the other martial artists all the way to South China. The movement caused by Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was huge. On the second day the entire West Chu martial arts world knew about it. For so many years Wind Cloud Sword Tomb had rarely ventured out. However, this time when he did, he caused a huge commotion. Within a day he defeated the World Alliance. Emperor Qin Qingdi of the World Alliance was nowhere to be found, and Deputy Alliance Master Fang Qingting was killed on the spot. Of course, this was not the most shocking thing. The most shocking thing was that Yanji actually went straight to South China and pointed his sword at the Kunlun Devil Cult's branch hall in South China. Since Chu Xiu destroyed the North and South Buddhist sects, almost no one in the entire martial arts world dared to go against him. Now, Wind Cloud Sword Tomb actually dared to provoke the Kunlun Devil Cult. This made everyone feel that either Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was crazy, or they had some unknown trump card. At this time in the branch hall of South China, Chu Wuji leisurely moved a chair and sat outside to bask in the sun. Chu Xiu and the others were still in closed-door cultivation. Chu Wuji was also in closed-door cultivation previously. But with the special soul crystals brought by Chu Xiu, he successfully stepped into mysterious heaven and earth. He did not continue his closed-door cultivation, but returned to the lower realm to guard the branch hall. At the same time he also took care of the construction progress of the branch hall in the lower realm. Of course, he was bored in closed-door cultivation, so he prepared to return to the lower realm to rest. In fact, although Chu Wuji was not that kind of lazy character, he was not the kind of madman who only focused on cultivation. Most of the time, he still held an attitude of letting nature take its course. Previously, the hidden devil lineage needed him to hold up the facade, so he naturally had to be tense. Now that there was Chu Xiu, he could also take a break from his busy schedule. Tangya, who was taking turns to rest in the upper realm, also came to Chu Wuji's side at this time. He smiled and said, "Lord Chu, did you learn this from Old Wei? You like to bask in the sun so much." Chu Wuji glanced at Tangya and said lightly, "When you reach my age you will know how comfortable it is to take a break from your busy schedule to bask in the sun. Of course, don't learn from me. Following official Chu, your current strength is far from the peak. By the way, I heard that you seem to have some grudges with the Tang sect in Sichuan. Haven't you thought of going back after so many years?" Tangya was considered to be relatively young and had more potential among the martial artists under Chu Xiu's command. Relying on the Daluotian environment, he had already reached the true fire spirit refinement realm. Tangya chuckled and said, "The past is like smoke. After following official Chu for so many years, I have already let go of the past." Just when Chu Wuji wanted to say something, a martial artist from the Kunlun Devil Cult suddenly ran over and said loudly, "Lord Chu, the World Alliance has come to ask for help." Chapter 1291. The Kunlun Demon Cult had already set up many branches in the southern barbarian land. When the Heavens Union's martial artists just appeared here, they were already discovered by the Kunlun Demon Cult's martial artists and knew the details of the matter. Hearing that World Alliance had been destroyed and that Yanji and the other warriors of Storm Sword Tomb were heading towards them, Chu Wuji felt that something was wrong. It was normal for Storm Sword Tomb to take advantage of Qin Qingdi's absence to attack World Alliance. After all, they had just been humiliated by Qin Qingdi. However, they knew that World Alliance had come to Kunlun Devil Cult to seek protection, yet they still dared to make a move. Where did their confidence come from? Ever since Chu Xiu destroyed the North and South Buddhist sects, it had been a long time since anyone dared to touch Kunlun Devil Cult's tiger whiskers. Chu Wuji had interacted with Storm Sword Tomb before. Although this sect was low-key, they weren't idiots. They probably had something to rely on for doing this. Chu Wuji immediately turned to Tangya and said, "Quickly return to Daluotian and inform sect leader Chen and sect leader Chen of this matter." Tangya was astonished. "It's just Storm Sword Tomb, it shouldn't be so serious, right?" Chu Wuji shook his head. "I'm not sure, but my intuition tells me that something isn't right. Moreover, World Alliance has been destroyed. No matter what, we have to inform sect leader Chen." Tang Ya also knew the relationship between Qinqing Di and Kunlun Devil Cult. He nodded and immediately returned to Daluotian to inform. At the same time, Chu Wuji called Grandmaster Yuan Ji and Phantom King Chaoing over. Can the two of you use the formation of the Lower Realms Branch Palace? Grandmaster Yuan Ji said, we can use it, but sect leader told us to focus on the Daluotian side. So, the formation of the Lower Realm isn't complete yet. Phantom King Chaoing said impatiently, even if it's not complete, it's enough to block a heaven and earth profound understanding peak opponent. Why are you being so careful? The Kunlun Devil Cult is so strong. Who in the lower realm can be our match? Although Chaoing joined the Kunlun Devil Cult because he was threatened by Chu Xiu, the feeling of being invincible was really good. Unlike back in Eastern Qi when he was designing a formation, he would have to consider whether it would be able to block that formation or this formation. He would be frustrated by all the questions. At this moment, Yan Ji's voice rang out from outside the Kunlun Devil Cult's branch palace. Yan Ji of Windcloud Sword Mound requests an audience with Kunlun Cult Master Chu. The voice reverberated through the entire Kunlun Devil Cult subhall. After Chu Wuji heard it, his expression suddenly changed. Chu Wuji was not Fang Qingting. He could only sense that Yan Ji was very powerful, but he could not sense his opponent's exact strength. He had seen a martial immortal in the Daluotian, a real martial immortal. At that moment, when Yan Ji spoke, Chu Wuji could tell from his voice that he was a genuine martial immortal. But a martial immortal could be born in the lower realm? And it was Yan Ji. In his memory, although Yan Ji's strength was not bad, it was impossible for him to be faster than Yi Xiaonan, an old celestial master. He had actually stepped into the martial immortal realm just like that. Strictly speaking, Yan Ji should have been a martial artist at the same level as Chu Wuji. Chu Wuji did not have time to think so much. He stood up and said in a deep voice, the cult master Chu is not in the Southern Man Branch Palace. Why did the Windcloud Sword Mound come here? Yan Ji said indifferently, Heaven Alliance's Qinqing Di killed my ancestor, Zhongli Mu. Naturally, I came today to take revenge. Don't say you don't know that the Heaven Alliance's martial artists came to the Southern Man Branch Palace of the Kunlun Devil Cult. The Windcloud Sword Mound has no intention of becoming enemies with the Kunlun Devil Cult. As long as the Kunlun Devil Cult hand over the person, the Windcloud Sword Mound will immediately retreat. Chu Wuji said in a deep voice, the Heaven Alliance's Qinqing Di has a friendly relationship with the Holy Cult. I will not hand over this person. Moreover, no one can take him away from the Holy Cult. Yan Ji, I don't know how you stepped into the martial immortal realm, but I have to advise you not to be too complacent. You've already destroyed the Heaven Alliance. Are you still going to kill us all? Yan Ji's face revealed a surprised expression. You actually know about the martial immortal realm? However, soon after, Yan Ji came to a realization. The foundation of the Kunlun demon sect was frighteningly deep. In fact, Dugu Weiwa himself was a martial immortal level existence. Thus, it was not strange for him to know about this matter. Towards this matter, Yan Ji wasn't too bothered. He only laughed coldly, your Kunlun demon sect has done a lot of things like exterminating clans and clans. But today you're telling me to let people off when possible? What a joke. Since Chu Xiu isn't here, then just as well. Hand him over. Chu Wuji squinted his eyes and said, I've said it before. No one can take anyone away from the holy cult. Not even a martial immortal? Yan Ji's eyes revealed a hint of coldness. Chu Wuji sneered disdainfully, frog at the bottom of a well. Do you really think that the martial immortal realm is the peak? You don't even have the qualification to see the bigger world. Chu Wuji's disdain was genuine. So what if he was a martial immortal? Yan Beifeng, who was a fourth-layer martial immortal, died in the hands of Chu Xiu. The Blissful Devil Palace, one of the southern region's great demon sects, was also destroyed by Chu Xiu. Although Chu Wuji did not witness the battle in the Middle Province with his own eyes, he had heard that Chu Xiu used only 2 moves to kill the Brahma sect's new martial immortal, Ex Angelua. So what if he was a martial immortal? His holy cult's cult master Chu had killed more than 1 or 2 martial immortals. Yan Ji was not qualified to show off in the Kunlun Devil cult with just this bit of strength. Chu Wuji's gaze seemed to have pierced Yan Ji. Yan Ji's eyes immediately revealed a hint of anger. He swept his hand with a sword energy. The roar of a black dragon shook the entire heaven and earth. It even caused the surrounding chi of heaven and earth to disperse. At that instant, Chu Wuji was certain that his opponent was definitely a martial immortal. Open the formation. Chu Wuji shouted. Actually, before Chu Wuji shouted, Master Yuanji and Chao Xin had already opened the formation. The radiance of the four symbols flowed within the green formation. However, the next moment, it was shattered by the sword energy. In an instant, Chao Xin and Master Yuanji's expressions changed. The mission that Chu Xiu gave them was to build a formation that could protect the lower region's sub-palace. To Master Yuanji and Chao Xin, a formation that could withstand a peak heaven and earth elemental enlightenment was already powerful enough. Who would have thought that it could not even withstand a single sword attack? The second formation rose again. The power of the five elements flowed and changed. Although it was the simplest formation of the five elements, it was mutually reinforcing and restraining, fusing and changing. There were hundreds of changes. This formation was built to prevent the opponent from destroying the first formation by relying on numbers. It was a backup plan. However, under Yan Ji's sword, it shattered once again. It was extremely miserable. Although there was only a fine line of difference between a martial immortal and a peak heaven and earth elemental enlightenment, it was like the difference between heaven and man. Master Yuanji and Chao Xin erected the third formation. This formation shone brightly. There was even a trace of the rootless sacred flame's power within it. This formation was also the last one to protect the sub-palace. It was also the strongest one. If one went deeper, it would be the passageway between the two realms. As such, Chao Xin and Master Yuanji used their full strength to fuse a trace of the rootless sacred flame's power into it. When Chu Wuji saw this, he suddenly stood up and went outside the formation. Master Yuanji was shocked when he saw this and he quickly said, "Lord Chu, what are you doing?" Chu Wuji said in a deep voice, "Are you sure this final formation can withstand a single sword attack from Yanji? If I don't stall for time, who will protect the items in the sub-palace?" Master Yuanji knew what Chu Wuji meant. Once this formation was broken, the passageway between the two realms would be exposed to Yanji. Now that Chu Xiu was planning to break the heavenly gates, no one could find out. Yanji looked at Chu Wuji in surprise. "Since you know that I'm a martial immortal, you still dare to stand up? Do you want to die?" Chu Wuji grinned. "Of course I want my life. However, ever since Cult Master Chu took over the holy cult, we have never given in even once. Others can't and neither can you, Yanji. Now that the cult master isn't here, I'm in charge. If I let you break the sub-palace and take the people away, wouldn't I lose face? After all, I rely on my face to make a living. I can lose my life but I can't lose my face." The astonishment in Yanji's eyes deepened. He had not expected that there would be such a character in the Kunlun demon sect. "You're so stubborn." As Yanji's voice rang out, the black dragon's roar grew louder. The black sword chi pierced through the sun, moon, mountains and rivers, heading straight for Chu Wuji. The powerful aura was enough to make one's heart tremble. Chu Wuji slashed the crescent blade in his hand. His chi and blood erupted almost at the same time. The powerful force instantly penetrated the crescent blade, causing the blood moon in the sky to shine brightly. Unfortunately, the difference in strength between them was too great. The crescent blade in his hand was shattered in one move. In the next moment, Chu Wuji acted as if he didn't see this scene. He actually took the initiative to rush towards Yanji. His hands formed a seal and moonlight floated up. Extreme sharpness shone from beneath Yanji's feet as he charged towards him. However, Yanji took a step forward and a powerful aura exploded. It instantly tore the gleam apart. At the same time, a sword aura shot out from his hand and sent Chu Wuji flying again. Chu Wuji's strength was much stronger than Fang Qingting's. He took a martial immortal expert sword aura head-on and was only seriously injured. He did not die. However, at that moment, Yanji had already descended from the sky. He once again released a sword aura. At this moment, there was a huge fluctuation in the entire southern Man Branch Palace. The rootless sacred flame burst forth and instantly blocked in front of Yanji, causing his sword chi to dissipate completely. Yanji looked at the rootless sacred flame in shock. He recognized it. It was the rootless sacred flame that burned at the peak of Kunlun Mountain. However, the question was, how did the Kunlun Devil cult move the rootless sacred flame here? Feeling the power coming from the rootless sacred flame, even with Yanji's current strength, he could not extinguish it. After taking a deep look at Chu Wuji behind the rootless sacred flame, Yanji waved his hand and left with his people. After Yanji left, the rootless sacred flame suddenly extinguished. Master Yuanji and Chaoing walked out from behind the formation. Both of them looked like they had been hollowed out. Chaoing cursed, "The formation that took half a year to make is completely ruined." Chapter 1292. Daluotian, Southern Barbarian Kangwu County. When Chu Wuji resisted Yan Ji, Tangya had already come to the stronghold of Southern Barbarian through the array and sent a message to Chu Xiu with a secret method. However, although there was an array transmission, the news had to be passed from the stronghold of Southern Barbarian to the Nan'an Prefecture, and then to Kangwu County. After receiving the news, Chu Xiu suddenly frowned. Previously he was still planning about the lower realm, but he didn't expect that the lower realm would be in chaos first. The World Alliance was actually breached by the Heartless Sword Tomb. This matter was beyond Chu Xiu's expectation. Of course, what was even more beyond Chu Xiu's expectation was that at this time, there was still someone who dared to provoke his Kunlun devil cult. Did the other party eat bear's heart and leopard's gall? In the intelligence, Tangya only described the other party as a martial immortal according to Chu Wuji's words. But no matter whether the other party was a martial immortal or not, to touch the Kunlun devil cult at this time was courting death. Of course Chu Xiu couldn't go alone. He had to tell Qinqingdi. Knocking on the door of Qinqingdi's retreat room, Qinqingdi walked out with a displeased expression. At present, Qinqingdi was stuck in an extremely mysterious realm between breakthrough and non-breakthrough. He had to comprehend the road ahead by himself. Therefore he needed to find time to digest the experience and power he obtained in Zhongzhou. At this time he was interrupted by Chu Xiu, so he was naturally a little unhappy. However, Qinqingdi also knew that Chu Xiu had always been reliable and calm. There should be some problems for him to suddenly interrupt his retreat. Chu Xiu took a deep breath and said, "Leader Qin, I have something to tell you. You have to be mentally prepared." Qinqingdi snorted. "Don't worry, I've been through all kinds of storms." "What happened?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Just now, I received news from my subordinates. Yan Ji of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb is suspected to have broken through the martial immortal realm and destroyed the Heaven Alliance. He even killed Deputy Alliance Master Fang Qingting. Now, some of the remaining disciples of the World Alliance have fled to the branch hall of my holy sect in the southern barbarian land to seek shelter. That's why I'm here to inform Alliance leader Qin to head down to the lower realm as soon as possible to resolve the crisis." As soon as Chu Xiu spoke, Qinqingdi's body was instantly enveloped by an explosive force. Chu Xiu saw that the situation was not good, and he instantly retreated a few dozen feet. "Wind, cloud, sword, tomb. F***ck your grandma?" Every word that Qinqingdi spat out was like a clap of thunder that resounded between heaven and earth, causing the hearts of those who saw it to go cold. Even the powerful violent force was like a storm, hovering around Qinqingdi and soaring into the sky. Chu Xiu remained silent. Didn't he say that he had seen great winds and waves? In fact, Chu Xiu also understood Qinqingdi's feelings at this time. After all, the World Alliance was built by him from scratch. Although with Qinqingdi's current strength, the power of the World Alliance was no longer of much help to him, it was still the World Alliance, Qinqingdi's World Alliance. If anything happened to his people, Chu Xiu would not be able to bear it. "Alliance Master Qin, even if you really want to F***ck the grandma of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb, you have to go to the lower realm first. The forces that I have deployed in the southern barbarian land are far less powerful than the Daluotian side. It is still unknown whether they can stop a martial immortal." Qinqingdi's eyes were red. He followed behind Chu Xiu and went straight to the southern barbarian land. At the same time he also called Xie Xiaolu. As the successor of the World Alliance, Xie Xiaolu naturally had to know these things. After Xie Xiaolu heard the news, his face was filled with rage and his eyes were already red. Fang Qingting's death was the most unacceptable to him. Qinqingdi's way of educating his disciple was basically a filial son under the rod. It was a frustrating education. After teaching he would let his disciple practice. If he couldn't practice he would beat him. After beating him he would practice again. It was simple and violent to the extreme. Only Fang Qingting was patient and gentle. He would often comfort Xie Xiaolu and patiently teach him some basic martial arts problems. It could even be said that Fang Qingting was half a master to Xie Xiaolu. Once he died, even Xie Xiaolu, who had always had a good character, was thoroughly furious. When Chu Xiu and Qinqingdi came to the lower realm, what he saw was Chu Wuji's heavily injured appearance and the southern barbarian branch palace with all the arrays destroyed. At that instant, Chu Xiu's gaze also became gloomy. After checking Chu Wuji's injuries, Chu Xiu immediately sent for the divine Dr. Feng Buping. Chu Wuji weakly waved his hand and said with a smile, "I'm fine. I won't die. I'm not that weak. However, Cult Master Chu, I was injured in the line of duty. Shouldn't you give me 2 more of the special soul crystals you brought back? Not to mention 2, I'll even give you 3. But what exactly happened?" That Yanji has already stepped into the martial immortal realm? What about the arrays in the southern barbarian branch palace? There are so many arrays yet they can still injure you? With that, Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Master Yuanji and Chao Shen. The former suddenly shivered. Although the latter always seemed to be unconvinced, under Chu Xiu's intense gaze, he still shivered. Chu Wuji waved his hand and said, "Don't blame them. It's not their problem. Most of the arrays in the lower realm were built under my supervision. I also thought that there would be no problems in the lower realm, so I put most of the power in the Daluocean. After all, there are many experts there. Who would have thought that a martial immortal would suddenly appear in the lower realm? Our previous preparations can be said to have been in vain. But fortunately, the two of them changed the arrays at the last minute and stimulated the power of the rootless sacred flame. Otherwise, I would have been really miserable this time." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Although the Daluocean have many resources and experts, the lower realm is our real foundation. So what if it's a martial immortal? It's not like we haven't killed one before. Go to the Daluocean and recuperate. I'll handle the matters in the lower realm. I'll help you take revenge. Count me in." Qin Di stood out with a gloomy face and said coldly, "Chu Xiu, don't fight with me this time. Destroy the Storm Sword Tomb and leave it to me." Seeing Qin Di's expression, Chu Xiu could only nod. It seemed that the Storm Sword Tomb had really angered Qin Di. Actually, the Storm Sword Tomb had indeed gone too far this time. The battle back then, to put it bluntly, was just a quarrel between the younger generation. The Storm Sword Tomb had already broken the rules by letting the older generation take action. Furthermore, Qin Di had absolutely shown mercy in that battle. Otherwise, with Qin Di's strength, which allowed him to fight against a half-step martial immortal, Zhong Limu would have been killed by Qin Di within 3 punches. In the end, Zhong Limu had survived for more than a year before he died. It was indeed a bit too much to blame this on Emperor Qin. Chu Xiu and Qin Di did not directly go to the Storm Sword Tomb for revenge. Instead, they first went to the World Alliance. Although the majority of the World Alliance members had escaped, there were still some who were killed. There were also some who chose to fight to the death, such as Fang Qingting. When Qin Di saw Fang Qingting's corpse, there was no longer any expression on his face. After a long while, Qin Di extended his hand and closed Fang Qingting's eyes. He said, "Idiot. Why are you trying to be strong when you can't win? Did I save you back then to let you die here?" After saying that, dense killing intent appeared in Qin Di's eyes. "Let's go to the Storm Sword Tomb." Chu Xiu and Qin Di's movements were not hidden from others. Within the ruins of the World Alliance, there were many anemophilia who were closely watching them. In that period of time, the Storm Sword Tomb's reputation grew. First, they destroyed the World Alliance. Then, they attacked the Kunlun Devil Cult's branch temple in the southern barbaric land. They destroyed the 2 formations of the Kunlun Devil Cult's branch temple and heavily injured Chu Wuji, who was quite famous in the Kunlun Devil Cult. In all these years, they were the only power that dared to attack the Kunlun Devil Cult. Ever since the northern and southern Buddhist sects were destroyed, the righteous sects that had been unable to raise their heads had their spirits lifted. Although this matter had nothing to do with the Kunlun Devil Cult in the beginning, within the Storm Sword Tomb, ever since Yanji returned, he had been in seclusion. He had just stepped into the martial immortal realm. In the previous month, he had only barely suppressed his power to the point where it was smooth. In reality, if he wanted to perfectly control the power of the martial immortal realm, he would need around a year's time. However, before long, news came from the outside world. It was said that Qin Di and Chu Xiu were heading straight for the Storm Sword Tomb. Of these two, one was an expert who had severely injured the Windcloud Sword Tomb and trampled on the dignity of the Windcloud Sword Tomb. The other was the Supreme Demon Lord who had destroyed the northern and southern Buddhist sects and dominated the underworld. When these two people attacked together, any sect would feel a mountain-like pressure. However, when the cultivators from the Storm Sword Tomb reported the news, Yanji did not respond. He only squinted his eyes and said, "You're finally willing to come out? Perfect, let's deal with them together." Ever since he stepped into the martial immortal realm, Yanji's state of mind had changed. Due to the influence of the Sword Soul, Chu Feng's temperament had become colder. In fact, even his cultivation of a martial immortal gave him the feeling of being a lonely expert. In today's world, how many people were left who were qualified to fight against him and were able to do so? With the strength Qin Di displayed back then, he could be counted as half. With the strength Chu Xiu displayed when he destroyed the northern and southern Buddhist sects, he could also be counted as half. With the two of them added together, they could serve as his whetstones, helping him stabilize his current realm of power. Yanji opened his eyes, and within them, there were actually black-colored sword intents. He had sufficient confidence. However, for some unknown reason, Chu Wuji's mocking words from the frog at the bottom of a well were constantly echoing in his mind. It made him feel a bit uncomfortable. At the same time as Yanji finished his preparations, the experts from the West Chu martial world, and even the entire Jianghu, hurriedly hurried over to the West Chu martial world. They wanted to witness the battle. The West Chu martial world, which was far away from the Central Plains and incomparably calm, was now boiling. Chapter 1293. Most of the top sects weren't willing to build their sects in bustling areas because it would affect cultivation and it wasn't a good location. Therefore, most of the sects were located in the middle of famous mountains and rivers, which were rather remote. However, the location of Wind Cloud Sword Mound was unusually off. It didn't look like it was in the mountains but deep in the forest of Zhe country. Looking from afar, Emperor Qin Qingdi and Chu Xiu could already see the appearance of the Wind Cloud Sword Mound. It wasn't glorious or majestic. Instead, it was surrounded by trees and buildings like a huge burial mound. Qin Qingdi sneered, sword mound, it sounds nice, but isn't it just a place to bury people? Don't they like to watch over graves? Fine, today I'll make them pay for it themselves. Qin Qingdi's domineering side was common, but it was rare to see him like this, filled with rage and murderous intent. Obviously, he couldn't wait to punch the people from Wind Cloud Sword Mound into their graves. When Qin Qingdi and Chu Xiu arrived, they didn't see the people from Wind Cloud Sword Mound, but they saw many people from other sections. Shun Baochen from Forgetting Sword Hut, Old Ancestor from Shangshuaying Clan, Ling Yunzi from Chunyang Dao Sect, Lu Changlu from Zhenwu Cult, and even the Old Celestial Master came down with the help of Senior Qing from Longhu Mountain. Of course, Senior Qing looked even older than the Old Celestial Master. He didn't look like a Taoist child of the Old Celestial Master, but more like an elder. Many of the remaining sects came, especially those from West Chu. Yi Xiaonan was in seclusion, but East Emperor Tai came. Even the West Chu royal family sent people over, standing behind the crowd in a low-key manner. Chu Xiu looked at the people present and smiled insincerely. Are you all here to watch the show? Chu Xiu's prestige was still there, and no one dared to make a sound. Lu Changlu was the only one who sighed. Cult Master Chu, we'd like to see if we can solve this in a different way. After all, revenge breeds revenge. When will there ever be an end to it? Wind Cloud Sword Tomb and the World Alliance, just because of a small quarrel back then, which couldn't even be considered as a grudge, they actually ended up in such a state. It was truly not worth it. In recent years, the Jianghu has been turbulent, and there have been several big battles. This time it's best not to fight if we can avoid it. The others looked at Lu Changlu with a strange expression. This person had gone into seclusion many years ago. Now he had also reached the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. However, it seemed that his brain had become stiff after being in seclusion. How could he still dare to persuade Chu Xiu? In the past, when Chu Xiu wanted to annihilate Sabodi Zen Monastery, Ying family's patriarch and the others went to Kunlun to persuade Chu Xiu. In the end, they were all scolded badly by Chu Xiu and left with their tails between their legs. Just when everyone thought that Lu Changlu would do the same, Chu Xiu calmly explained to Lu Changlu. Sect Master Lu's words are incorrect. You've also said that this matter was caused by an insignificant quarrel. So why are you pursuing this quarrel and not letting it go? It's not Qin Qingdi, it's Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. Also, Yanji attacked the Nanman branch of the Holy Sect. I haven't settled the score with him yet. I, Chu Xiu, am a reasonable person. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. Of course, the main character today isn't me, but Alliance Master Qin. Sect Master Lu, it's useless even if you persuade me. Can you persuade Alliance Master Qin? When the crowd saw this scene, they were all astonished. Since when did Chu Xiu's temper become so good? He actually calmly explained things to Lu Changlu. Of course, Chu Xiu wouldn't admit that he was afraid of Ning Xuanji. In the central province, Ning Xuanji had opened a back door for him. This was a favor and he had to return it no matter what. On the Daluotian side, Chu Xiu had no chance to return the favor to Ning Xuanji. So here he could only return the favor to his disciples and grand-disciples. Lu Changlu silently glanced at Qin Qingdi and sighed. He didn't continue to persuade him. Chu Xiu still looked calm, but on Qin Qingdi's side, as long as one wasn't blind, one could feel the powerful killing intent from Qin Qingdi. It was like a volcano that was about to erupt. When Qin Qingdi put on an unapproachable look, Lu Changlu knew that he was determined to fight with Storm Sword Tomb. No one could persuade him. Looking at the Storm Sword mound, Emperor Qinqing took a step forward. The powerful force instantly shook the earth, as if an earth dragon was turning over. That powerful force made everyone's expression change. Little bastards of Storm Sword Tomb, come out and die. At this moment, a thunderous roar caused the sky to change color. In an instant, the sky was covered with dark clouds. Chu Xiu raised his head and looked at the sky. A hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. Qinqing Di didn't break through in the central province. No one knew where the peak of his path was. However, after the trip to the central province, his strength had obviously improved. Although Qinqing Di wasn't a martial immortal yet, his strength had reached a level where he could affect a portion of the power of rules. Within Storm Sword Tomb, the roar of a dragon and the cry of a sword resounded. The black dragon sword intent slashed through the sky, instantly shattering the dark clouds. Yanji stepped on the air. Sword energy surrounded his body and stirred the rules, causing the surrounding void to tremble. The Ying family's patriarch and the others looked at Yanji with astonishment. Previously they were still puzzled. They didn't know why Yanji would suddenly attack the World Alliance. He even dared to attack the Kunlun Devil Cult's branch palace. Now they finally understood. Yanji had actually taken the final step that they yearned for day and night. All the cultivators in the lower realm who had reached the heaven and earth profound understanding realm wanted to take that final step. The only difference was that some people gave up when they saw that there was no path in front of them. There were also some people like Yi Xiaonan. Even if they knew that their future was bleak, as long as they had a chance, they would walk to the end. If they knew that Yanji had taken this step, they would have come here first. No matter what price they had to pay, they had to ask Yanji how he had taken this step. But now, whether it was Yanji or Qinqing Di, both sides clearly had no intention of listening to their words. Staring at Qinqing Di, Yanji said coldly, "I thought you would be so afraid that you wouldn't dare to show up. I didn't expect that I had underestimated you. Back then you were here. You smashed my Storm Sword Tomb's formation with one punch and trampled on my Storm Sword Tomb's dignity. You heavily injured the Patriarch with one punch, causing him to pass away a year later. It can be said that without you I wouldn't have reached my current realm. Without your actions the World Alliance wouldn't have been destroyed. Qinqing Di, do you regret that you were so merciless when you attacked back then?" Qinqing Di nodded and said emotionlessly, "I do regret it." Everyone was taken aback. Did Qinqing Di admit defeat? That shouldn't be the case. With their understanding of Qinqing Di, even if he had truly taken a step to the peak and entered the martial immortal realm, with Qinqing Di's personality, he wouldn't admit defeat so easily. Then Qinqing Di suddenly raised his head. His face was distorted by rage and murderous intent. "I regret that I didn't punch that old bastard to death back then. Why didn't I send all of you bastards from the Storm Sword Tomb to heaven?" As Emperor Qinqing Di's voice fell, his fist suddenly smashed down. However, this punch was like a falling meteorite, making a deafening explosion. The space trembled, and the primordial qi in the air even exploded and dissipated in an instant. Yanji's expression finally changed when he saw how powerful Qinqing Di's punch was. After refining the power of the Sword Soul and stepping into the martial immortal realm, Yanji actually didn't notice that he felt like a lonely expert. It was a feeling of emptiness brought about by the sudden increase in his power and the fact that he had never seen truly powerful power. So, whether it was against the World Alliance or against Chu Wuji, Yanji didn't actually use his full strength. He simply used his strength to crush them. Perhaps in his eyes, those people were no longer worthy of him using his full strength. That was why Chu Wuji said that he was a frog at the bottom of a well. He had obtained the power of the martial immortal realm, but he didn't have the mental state that a martial immortal should have. In the history of the Jianghu, even in the lower realms, there would always be one or two people in every generation who relied on outstanding talent and perseverance to step into the martial immortal realm. However, what they gave up was far more than Yanji, who took a shortcut. Regardless of whether it was Yi Xiaonan or the old celestial master who stepped into the martial immortal realm, it was likely that their mental state was much more stable than Yanji's. So, when Yanji saw the power of Qinqing Di's punch, even though he wasn't a martial immortal, his power was close to that of a martial immortal. However, Yanji didn't feel the excitement of encountering a worthy opponent. Instead, he felt a bit panicked, as if something that belonged to him had been snatched away. The next moment, Yanji tapped between his eyebrows. Black light flowed and a black long sword appeared from between his eyebrows. The black long sword was in the shape of a dragon. The hilt was the head of a dragon, the body of the sword was the body of a dragon, and the tip of the sword was the tail of a dragon. This was a long sword formed by the sword's soul. The sword intent it exuded was so dense that no divine weapon would be able to contain it. As the sword stabbed forward, the sound of the sword and the dragon's roar resounded through the sky. The surrounding spiritual energy began to distort, transforming into boundless sword aura that instantly enveloped Qinqing. A series of sword cries and explosions rang out. Not a single figure could be seen in the sky, only boundless sword chi. Everyone's expressions changed slightly. Even they had to expend a lot of effort to block Yanji's attack. However, the might of the countless sword auras condensing and taking the final step. Was it really that terrifying? Chu Xiu stood with his hands behind his back. There wasn't the slightest bit of worry in his eyes. Qinqing's strength was already enough to defeat a half-step martial immortal. And now, even if he were to face a real martial immortal, Chu Xiu was still confident in him. Moreover, even though he didn't know how Yanji reached the martial immortal realm, he could feel that Yanji's aura was a bit unstable, as if he hadn't completely understood the realm. Chapter 1294. It was the same realm, but the power brought about by different ways of breaking through was also different. Chu Xiu's speed of breaking through was very fast, but he rarely had a situation where his foundation was unstable. That was because before Chu Xiu broke through, he often challenged those in a higher realm than him. He was actually very familiar with that realm. Yanji was different. He knew nothing about martial immortal realm. Perhaps there were records of martial immortals in the Storm Sword Tomb, but there shouldn't be many. There were also no detailed descriptions or cultivation methods. That was why Yanji was in such a situation. He clearly had the power that martial immortal realm should have, but he didn't have the mental state to truly control that power. At that moment, in mid-air, the powerful black dragon sword aura in Yanji's hand attacked as if it covered the sky. However, Qinqing didn't dodge it. His fist took the sword aura head-on and smashed down. Qinqing's body was burning fiercely with real fire of internal power. It even caused the surrounding space to distort. The powerful sword aura was first weakened by the real fire of internal power. The remaining portion was directly taken by Qinqing's body. Most people in Jianghu only knew that Qinqing's power was extremely powerful, but they neglected that Qinqing's body was also incomparably powerful. However, most of the time he was the one beating others up and not the other way around. So, that was often overlooked. The sword aura in Yanji's eyes soared into the sky. The black dragon sword spirit in his hand roared and he slashed down from the sky. In an instant, everything in the world, including the surrounding primordial chi and even a portion of the power of rules, all turned into swords and slashed towards Qinqing. The powerful power of martial immortal realm twisted the rules. The power that exploded in that instant made everyone raise their eyebrows. Qinqing was sent flying. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu was certain that Yanji did step into martial immortal realm by accident. Although he was a genuine martial immortal, the abilities that he had used were all basic abilities. He did not possess any divine abilities. In fact, he did not even possess the martial skills that a martial immortal should possess. In fact, even his martial path was still at the profound understanding realm. He was only able to control the surrounding heaven and earth, and was not able to skillfully utilize the power of laws like martial immortals. Although there was indeed some nomological power left in his sword, it was just some instinct. Qinqing was blasted away by a sword stained with the power of rules, but he just shook his head as if nothing had happened. He rushed forward again and punched again. Yanji frowned, and the black dragon sword in his hand flew out, transforming into a black dragon that was hundreds of feet long. As Yanji formed a seal, the dragon's tail suddenly lashed out. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down, but it contained boundless sharpness. Although Yanji did not possess a martial path or martial skills that were compatible with the martial immortal realm, the black dragon sword spirit he refined was formed by the true spirits and sword spirits of countless sword experts in the sword tomb over 1,000 years. In terms of the path of the sword, it had countless transformations. However, Qinqing's fist still landed. Although his arm was lacerated by the extreme sharpness, his expression and the power of his fist did not change in the slightest. Immovable as a mountain. Qinqing's state of mind was firm, and the power of his fist was steady. It was like a towering mountain towering above the earth. Unless one was able to chop the towering mountain in half, no damage would cause him to waver. Chu Xiu silently observed from below. He did not have the slightest intention to make a move. Although it was very simple for him to take care of Yanji with his current strength, The storm sword tomb was left for Qinqing Di to vent his anger. He had no intention of overstepping his boundaries. Besides, from Chu Xiu's perspective, Yanji was about to lose because his heart was in a mess. As Qinqing Di's punches landed, no matter how the black dragon sword spirit in Yanji's hand changed, it could not destroy it. No matter how many changes the black dragon sword spirit had, it was not a martial skill. Qinqing Di responded to the changes by remaining unchanged. In the end, the first to give in was Yanji himself. "Are you done? Is this all you've got?" Qinqing Di coldly stared at Yanji. At that instant, the gold-and-silver true energy fire around Qinqing Di's body suddenly changed. It started to emit a red glare as dazzling as the sun. The next instant, Qinqing Di still threw a punch. However, that punch seemed to have passed through countless spaces. The scorching red glare burned all the power of rules. It ignored space, ignored time. The punch was thrown and the punch was thrown. It was completed in almost an instant. With a loud explosion, Yanji was sent flying. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his eyes revealed an expression of disbelief. "I'm actually injured? I've already stepped into the legendary realm. Why can't I defeat Qinqing Di?" The 3 generations of Wind Cloud Sword Tomb have been studying and waiting, but in the end I still can't defeat Qinqing Di's punch? Chu Xiu squinted his eyes. Qinqing Di had actually broken through. The path that Qinqing Di took was different from ordinary warriors. No matter how strong his physical body was, he could not control the power of rules. Therefore, there was only one way for him to defeat a martial immortal, and that was to use his strength to break the rules. If you can control the rules, I can break the rules. In this way, a martial immortal would have no advantage in front of Qinqing Di. The true energy fire around Qinqing Di's body burned fiercely. Any power of rules in front of him was like an illusion. They were shattered in an instant. In just a few punches, although Qinqing Di's power was greatly consumed, Yanji was already spitting out blood. When the others saw this, they couldn't help but want to make a move. In fact, their relationship with Wind Cloud Sword Tomb wasn't that good. Even though they were also from the 5 great sword sects, Wind Cloud Sword Tomb rarely interacted with them. However, the strength that Yanji displayed right now was the realm that they dreamed of. Therefore, they didn't want Qinqing Di to kill Yanji. At the very least, they wanted to keep him alive and ask him how he stepped into this realm. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu waved his hand. The saber light in the air twisted. There was saber intent, but there was no saber shape. In front of everyone's eyes, the ground was torn open. It was so deep that they couldn't see the bottom. It was like an abyss. Seeing this scene and feeling the fluctuation of power, everyone's expression changed. Martial immortal. Another martial immortal. Compared to Yanji, Chu Xiu was even stronger. His control over the power of rules was more skillful. They couldn't understand it, but they could clearly feel the power. In an instant, the eyes of the Ying family's old ancestor and the others were filled with unwillingness. There was even a hint of jealousy. They had been searching for this realm for their entire lives, but they couldn't see the path ahead. It was fine that Yanji had stepped into this realm, but why did Chu Xiu, who was younger than Yanji, also step into this realm? Looking at the crowd, Chu Xiu smiled coldly and said, "Everyone, I've said it before. This time it's a matter between the World Alliance and the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. I won't interfere, but you guys shouldn't interfere either." Everyone present silently retracted their footsteps. They yearned for the legendary power of a martial immortal, but they didn't want to experience it. At that moment, the only power of rules that Yanji could rely on had been shattered by Qinqing Di. His defeat was already decided. Looking at Qinqing Di, all the anger, hatred and unwillingness in Yanji's heart surged. At that instant, he formed a seal with his hand and the black dragon sword soul suddenly entered between his eyebrows. In an instant, his entire body was surrounded by a pitch-black sword aura. He roared at the sky and a black sword ray soared into the sky. Its might instantly increased by several times. Chu Xiu looked at Yanji in surprise. He really didn't expect Yanji to fight with his life on the line. Although Qinqing Di had an epiphany during the battle and could shatter the rules, he couldn't control them. Therefore, as long as Yanji used the power of rules to escape, Qinqing Di wouldn't be able to catch up to the speed of a martial immortal. Of course, Chu Xiu would definitely try to stop him, but who would have thought Yanji would choose to fight with his life on the line? Qinqing Di sneered and said, "You're ready to fight with your life on the line? Or do you think you can defeat me by fighting with your life on the line? You're worse than that old guy Zhongli Mu. That old guy knows himself well, but you can't see yourself clearly." Yanji merged with the sword soul. In an instant, the sword slashed down and Yanji's body turned into a huge black dragon that was hundreds of feet long. It descended with an overwhelming killing intent. In an instant, space was torn apart and the power of rules was used to the extreme. Even cracks appeared on Yanji's body. It was an incomparably tragic scene. Qingqingdi let out a long breath. The scarlet true fire of inner power around his body was withdrawn. He floated in the air and not a single strand of astral energy leaked out from his body. A punch slowly smashed down. Its speed was extremely slow, but in the eyes of the crowd, it seemed to be in slow motion. But in reality it wasn't slow. It was because Qingqingdi's punch was no longer restricted by the power of rules. The black dragon sword soul slashed down in an overwhelming manner. Qingqingdi's entire body was shrouded in the boundless sharpness. However, all of his power was restrained within his body. No matter how the sword chi slashed at him, the punch landed firmly as if nothing could stop him. Cracks appeared on Qingqingdi's body, but he seemed to be unaware of it. He passed through the countless slashes of the sword chi. The punch that did not contain any astral energy erupted with the purest fluctuation of power. Time seemed to have stopped in an instant. In the next moment it suddenly erupted. Everyone present was dumbfounded as they looked at the sky. The huge black dragon that was hundreds of feet long began to shatter inch by inch. Then it completely dissipated. Yanji's sword soul was the same as the black dragon sword soul. It completely dissipated and not even his corpse was left behind. The people below were all dumbfounded and couldn't accept this. That was the legendary martial immortal, a realm above the peak. He died just like that? How long had it been since he broke through and he died? Of course, they hadn't seen the scene of Chu Xiu killing Xanjialua. If there was a ranking of martial immortals who died the fastest, Xanjialua would probably be ranked first among the Daluotian. Chapter 1295. He killed Yanji with one punch and broke through the limit of power, but there was no joy in Qingqingdi's eyes. Yanji died, but Fang Qingting couldn't be resurrected, and the Dead World Alliance martial artists couldn't be resurrected either. Chu Xiu frowned and said, "You're injured." Qingqingdi waved his hand and said, "It's okay, I'll leave the rest to you. Aren't they called Sword Tomb? Well, let's bury them all in the tomb." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of the rest." With that said, Chu Xiu waved his hand, but Tanya and others came out of nowhere and began to attack Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. Qingqingdi's revenge was completed, but for Chu Wuji's revenge, Chu Xiu hadn't taken revenge yet. This time, the other martial artists present didn't stop them. They had dealt with Chu Xiu for a long time. They knew that when Chu Xiu wanted to kill, they couldn't stop him. However, seeing a big sect destroyed in the hands of Chu Xiu, they felt a chill in their hearts. Since Chu Xiu destroyed the North and South Buddhist sects last time, Kunlun devil cult had been very low-key. Even Chu Xiu rarely appeared in the underworld. They once thought that Chu Xiu restrained his temper after stepping into heaven and earth mystic opening and devoted himself to martial arts, just like Yi Xiaonan. This also made them relieved. But today, Chu Xiu and Qingqingdi destroyed Wind Cloud Sword Tomb with absolute power, which made them a little scared. Especially those under Chu Xiu. Tanya brought very few people this time, less than 100 people. They were all the martial artists who were responsible for guarding the lower realm. But the problem was that the strength of these people was a bit abnormal. The weakest was actually the real pellet state. Even in a big family like the Shangshuang clan, the real pellet state is also the elder deacon of the family and the backbone of the family. However, in the Kunlun devil cult he is just an ordinary disciple? Could it be that these people were secretly trained by the Kunlun devil cult? Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Everyone, what are you waiting for? If you don't treat me well during the period of extermination, I won't take care of your meals." The Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was destroyed not because I was overbearing, but because the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was too arrogant. Beyond the heaven and earth profound understanding is the peak? There is always a higher mountain. The true peak is still very far away. Everyone, please disperse. I reckon it won't be long before we meet again. Chu Xiu's words confused everyone present. If it wasn't the peak, then what was it? Although Chu Xiu stepped into the martial immortal realm, no one dared to ask how Chu Xiu stepped into this realm. What they cared more about was Chu Xiu's last sentence. What does it mean that we will meet again soon? What is Chu Xiu going to do? By the time everyone had left, Tanya had already finished his battle. As soon as Yanji died, the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb no longer had the courage to fight, and Chu Xiu found that he had overestimated the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. In terms of sword cultivation, These guys who spent most of their time cultivating in the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb were indeed extraordinary. But this also meant that the things they had experienced were too little, and their state of mind was a little fragile. The number of people who surrendered reached 70%. Chu Xiu didn't waste those people. He pulled them all back to build the Southern Barbarian Branch Palace. Previously, the 3 formations of the Southern Barbarian Branch Palace were destroyed by Yan Ji. Master Yuan Ji and Chao Xun pondered over the painful experience and prepared to strengthen the formations by another level. So, while laying the formations, they also needed a large number of cultivators to provide energy, polish the formation materials, and so on. These things were handed over to them. After everyone was dealt with, Chu Xiu and Qinqing Di stepped into the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb and looked around. To most people, the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was indeed mysterious enough. Many rogue sword cultivators would even choose to bring their own swords into the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb's bottomless ruin. The Wind Cloud Sword Tomb wasn't the starting point of the sword path, but it was the ending point. However, when Qinqing Di and Chu Xiu arrived before the real tomb, they were a bit disappointed. Because countless sword cultivators and broken swords were buried within the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb, the power it gave birth to was indeed extremely astonishing. Sword energy filled the air. But this power was mixed with too much evil aura. Moreover, there were quite a lot of impurities, so it wasn't too suitable for cultivation. Moreover, in the eyes of Qinqing Di and Chu Xiu, it wasn't too powerful. After all, they had seen the Daluo Divine Palace, the place where the laws of 2 worlds twisted. A mere Wind Cloud Sword Tomb wasn't enough to make them make a fuss. But just at that moment, in Chu Xiu's mind, the demon in his heart suddenly said, "There's something in the deepest part of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb." Chu Xiu was taken aback. What was it that was buried so deep? Even with his current primordial spirit power, he couldn't detect it. He extended his hand and grabbed. The space within the laws twisted, and in the deepest part of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb, a black dragon the size of a thumb, emitting astonishing sword energy, was caught by Chu Xiu. The power on it was the same as the power on Yanji's body. Clearly, he had relied on the thing born from the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb to become a martial immortal. The power this little thing gave birth to isn't strong. Yanji relied on it to become a martial immortal? The demon said, "Of course not. It should only be a seed, the seed of a sword soul. Only by absorbing the powerful sword energy and other powers of the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb can it become a sword soul." Chu Xiu raised his brows and put it away. Of course, he wasn't interested in keeping it for over 1,000 years to give birth to some sword soul. But a single seed was still a decent treasure. At that moment, Qinqing Di suddenly said, "Cult Master Chu, there's something I want to talk to you about." Chu Xiu was slightly taken aback. He felt that there was something wrong with Qinqing Di's tone. Chu Xiu and Qinqing Di had known each other for a long time. Back when he was still a young hero on the Longhu list, he had already known Qinqing Di. Moreover, he and Xie Xiaolu were good friends. So all along, Qinqing Di gave off the feeling of a senior. But now, Qinqing Di's tone was very formal. That feeling was different from before. "Alliance Master Qin, please speak your mind." Qinqing Di let out a long breath and said, "I want to merge the World Alliance with the Kunlun Devil Cult." Chu Xiu was taken aback. He didn't expect Qinqing Di to talk to him about that. One must know that as long as the Heaven Alliance had Emperor Qinqing Di, it would be sufficient for the Heaven Alliance to flourish. Also, given the relationship between him and Emperor Qinqing Di, both parties were allies. No matter how the Kunlun demon sect developed, it would never threaten the Heaven Alliance. So, why did Qinqing Di want to merge the World Alliance with the Kunlun Devil Cult? Qinqing Di sighed and said, "This time the World Alliance's fall is actually a lesson. I'm not as good as you, Cult Master Chu, who fought and advanced in the underworld and had many experts by your side. Actually, I'm not qualified to be a leader because I'm too strong. I'm so strong that I've already broken away from the World Alliance, causing it to become dispensable. But it's a foundation that I built from scratch. I don't want to give it up, so it became what it is today. I can deal with the karmic opponents that I've provoked, but the forces under me can't. There are many experts in the Kunlun Devil Cult. You can make the entire Kunlun Devil Cult dominate the underworld. That's why I said that I'm not as good as you. But I don't want to give up on those who are still alive in the World Alliance. Give me a hall in the Kunlun Devil Cult. From now on, there will be no World Alliance in the underworld. There will only be the World Hall under the Kunlun Devil Cult. If you have any trouble with the Dalu Ocean, you can ask me for help. But don't expect me to stay in the Kunlun Devil Cult during normal times. How about it? Do you accept my World Alliance?" Chu Xiu did not even hesitate as a smile appeared on his face. "Of course. From now on, Alliance Leader Qin, no Hall Master Qin, will be a family with our holy sect. However, the position of a Hall Master is a little low. After I reorganize the Kunlun Demon Sect, I will rearrange the ranking. Given Qin Qingdi's strength, the strength of Chu Xiu's side would skyrocket if he joined. Moreover, even though the World Alliance was born in the wilderness and didn't seem strong, it was because Qin Qingdi wasn't too concerned about it. The World Alliance's foundation was too shallow. It was still a wilderness sect, so it lacked cultivation resources and a cultivation environment. It was normal for them to be weak. But after joining the Kunlun Devil cult, they didn't have to worry about it anymore. This was a good thing that was delivered to his doorstep. If Chu Xiu rejected it, he would be out of his mind. Chu Xiu didn't have any ideas about the World Alliance in the past because he was very law-abiding and had a bottom line. Rabbits don't eat the grass near their burrows. He was already so familiar with Xie Xiaolu and Qin Qingdi. It wasn't very kind of him to annex their forces. But now that Qin Qingdi took the initiative to come to his doorstep, he wouldn't be polite anymore. Qin Qingdi waved his hand casually. What Hall Leader or Demon Lord? It's just a title. I don't care about it. Lu Jiang, he has been eyeing the position of the 4 Demon Lords for hundreds of years. It's almost become an obsession. You should give it to him. Alright, what were you guys plotting previously? All of you were so mysterious. At that time, Chu Xiu and the others were discussing attacking the heavenly gates. Qin Qingdi was tactful and didn't participate. Actually, he was also very curious. Since they were on the same side now, it wasn't a big deal to talk about it. When Chu Xiu told him about his plan to attack the heavenly gates, Qin Qingdi's eyes lit up. The name Jun Wuxian of the heavenly gates didn't scare Qin Qingdi. Instead, it made him excited. It was Qin Qingdi's dream to be able to exchange blows with an expert of this level. So, you're going to attack the heavenly gates after Shang Tianliang and the others come out of seclusion? Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and said, there's no rush. Before attacking the heavenly gates, I need to borrow strength. There's a secret realm in the heavenly gates that nurtures god generals. The combat power there isn't weak. I don't want to use all the resources I've accumulated to fight against the heavenly gates. Then what are you going to do? Chu Xiu looked outside and said calmly, there are many forces that can be used in the underworld. Chapter 1296. Chu Xiu had the confidence to fight to the death with Elysium, and he was 100% sure that he could defeat Elysium. In the past few years, all of Chu Xiu's men had been rotated to the Dalu Ocean, and their strength had skyrocketed. The advantage of Elysium was that their mystic realm was the closest to the Dalu Ocean, so it would be affected by the Dalu Ocean's rules of power, and its vitality was richer. But that was only in comparison. Chu Xiu came directly to the Dalu Ocean, which was like cheating. Not to mention that Chu Xiu controlled the barbarians of the southern barbaric land, and he was also the governor of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. In the huge southern barbaric land, Chu Xiu was basically the local tyrant, and all kinds of resources were under his control. With so many things in hand, if he couldn't beat a mystic realm of Elysium, it would be a joke. It was just that Chu Xiu's habit was to use the smallest price to do everything. Only knowing how to rush forward like a fool was not Chu Xiu's style. Qin Qingdi waved his hand. These plots and tricks? You're good at plotting, so I won't participate. Just call me when it's time to make a move. Chu Xiu nodded silently. Qin Qingdi was the standard foolhardy style of doing things, but it was also a kind of ability to be reckless all the way until now. After emptying the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb, Chu Xiu first told Tanya to go back to the Dalu Ocean, and told the others to immediately return to the lower realm after coming out of seclusion, and to bring back 90% of the people. As for Chu Xiu, he went to find someone, Dong Huangtai. In the West Chu forest, Dong Huangtai turned into a cloud of black mist and quickly flew through the air, but his heart was filled with many thoughts. Long before Chu Xiu entered the Dalu Ocean realm, Dong Huangtai had already stepped into the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. Moreover, his power was extremely profound, so after he deduced the martial arts of the true fire spiritual cultivation realm to the extreme, he naturally stepped into the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. He directly skipped the early stage and his power was already complete, just like Lu Jianghe back then. However, he was still filled with reverence and yearning for the martial immortal realm. Yet, on that day he actually personally witnessed the death of a martial immortal. This was an enormous shock to Dong Huangtai. Just as his mind was in a mess, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Dong Huangtai, no matter what, we're old friends. I told those righteous people to scram, but I didn't say you could leave. Why aren't you catching up with me after watching the show? Dong Huangtai's body shuddered and he flew out of the black mist. He was so frightened that he almost fell to the ground. He looked at Chu Xiu, who was slowly walking through the air behind him. There was a 30% fear in his eyes, a 30% vigilance, a 30% stupefaction, and a 10% confusion. That person's name shook the Jianghu. To be more precise, his infamy spread throughout the Jianghu. Whoever saw him take the initiative to look for him had the same expression. Moreover, when had he ever been friends with Chu Xiu? He didn't even know. After calming himself down, Dong Huangtai clasped his hands and said, "Cult Master Chu's divine might is matchless." Those righteous cultivators left with their tails between their legs. Naturally, I have to go back and report to the cult master. As Dong Huangtai spoke, he cursed inwardly. Chu Xiu was the cult master of the Kunlun devil cult. Yi Xiaonan was the cult master of the moon-worshipping cult. Furthermore, the moon-worshipping cult was of the bright demon lineage. He couldn't be thinking of attacking the moon-worshipping cult and leaving only one cult master in the Jianghu, could he? Chu Xiu didn't know Dong Huangtai had so many thoughts in his mind. He said indifferently, "I just wanted to pay a visit to Cult Master Yi Xiaonan. If I'm not mistaken, Cult Master Yi should have stepped into the martial immortal realm, right?" Dong Huangtai's heart immediately trembled. Although he controlled it very well, and even his gaze didn't change much with Chu Xiu's current strength, he could clearly feel the undulations coming from his body. Dong Huangtai wanted to deny it, but when he saw Chu Xiu's determined gaze, he knew he couldn't hide it. So, Dong Huangtai could only force a smile and say, "How did Cult Master Chu know that?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "If there's anyone in the Jianghu who's most likely to step into the martial immortal realm, it's definitely Cult Master Yi. Yan Ji, a guy who relied on external forces, could step into the martial immortal realm. Cult Master Yi naturally can't be any worse. I remember that Cult Master Yi has been refining the natural demon seed for a very long time. Even without the natural demon seed, I believe Cult Master Yi can also take this step. Don't be nervous. The Jianghu now doesn't differentiate between the hidden demon clan and the demon clan. We're all people of the demon clan. What Cult Master Yi pursues doesn't conflict with what I pursue, so we won't be enemies." Although Chu Xiu told Dong Huangtai not to be nervous, how could he not be? Although he still couldn't figure out what Chu Xiu's goal was, since Chu Xiu had spoken, he could only bring Chu Xiu back to the moon-worshipping cult. After Chu Xiu entered the moon-worshipping sect, the moon-worshipping sect's high priest, who already looked a bit old, and a few other divine magispriests came to greet Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu was a bit puzzled. He asked, "Where's the saintess of the moon-worshipping cult?" Dong Huangtai hesitated for a moment before saying, "She's undergoing a tribulation." Chu Xiu was stunned. Undergoing a tribulation? A saintess undergoing a tribulation? However, Dong Huangtai didn't say it directly. Instead, he looked at the high priest, unsure if he should say it or not. The high priest of moon-worshipping cult snorted coldly and said, "It's all in the past. Some people in the devil path vaguely know about it. What's the point of hiding it from Cult Master Chu?" Dong Huangtai sighed and said, "Undergoing a tribulation is actually the tribulation of the inherited parasite poison. Speaking of which, it also involves some of the moon-worshipping cult's disgraceful past. The position of the saintess of the moon-worshipping cult has always been passed down. You know this, Cult Master Chu. However, in the Gu lineage, the saintess was the first to master it. All the Gu techniques of the moon-worshipping cult's disciples were passed down by the first saintess. In the beginning, the moon-worshipping cult didn't have a high priest or even 9 divine magi. Only the saintess controlled everything. At that time, the moon-worshipping cult was still very weak, so the first saintess researched a kind of Gu for inheritance. It was called the longevity Gu. The saintess can die, but the longevity Gu won't. Therefore, every generation of saintess will use their own blood and sweat to refine the longevity Gu and obtain its inheritance. Therefore, it's possible for the saintess to have a sudden burst of strength and cross several realms. Chu Xiu nodded in understanding, but at the same time he was waiting for the next part. There was no free lunch in this world. If the effect of the longevity Gu was really that strong, the moon-worshipping cult would have long been the world's #1 sect. Sure enough, Dong Huangtai sighed and continued, "It's just that after a long time the moon-worshipping cult discovered that the longevity Gu can't really live forever. Its so-called longevity is actually just devouring the blood and lifespan of every generation's saintess. Therefore, every generation's saintess has a very short life. It has nothing to do with realms because when feeding the longevity Gu, a large part of their lifespan has already been plundered. And every time the inheritance is passed down, the longevity goo will leave the mark of the previous generation's saintess. The moon-worshipping cult has been passed down for thousands of years, and there are already hundreds of saintess marks left behind. If too many of these marks are accumulated, it will become extremely dangerous to break through during the inheritance. Of the previous 3 generations of saintess, one had her primordial spirit torn apart during the inheritance and died. Another was seriously injured and only one managed to survive. So now the longevity goo is no longer a goo but a goo poison. A goo poison that harms others and oneself. Chu Xiu nodded lightly. He didn't ask why the moon-worshipping cult continued to use the longevity goo even though they knew it was a goo poison. Since the saintess was the ruler of the moon-worshipping cult in the early days, it was conceivable how strong the inheritance she left behind was. Moreover, every generation's saintess was basically an outstanding figure on the Longhu list. It was not a problem to break through the real pellet state, and it was only a matter of time to step into the true fire spirit refinement state. Therefore, the power brought by the longevity goo was likely to help her directly step into the heaven and earth mystic connecting state. Otherwise, it would be meaningless. In the mortal realm, any powerhouse of the heaven and earth mystic connecting state was a supreme-level character. Would the moon-worshipping cult give up this kind of power? Even if no one forced them, there would probably be people who would take the initiative to feed the longevity goo with their blood and sweat. Although the moon-worshipping cult was now strong enough to not lack a saintess, it was obvious that this kind of thing was inevitable. Chu Xiu didn't say much and he said in a deep voice, "Take me to see Master Yi." Dong Huangtai only brought Chu Xiu to the back mountain and left. Yi Xiaonan was dressed in black and stood barefoot on the top of the mountain. "Master Yi, long time no see. Congratulations to Master Yi for stepping into the martial immortal realm." Yi Xiaonan turned his head. The aura he exuded was that of the martial immortal realm. Furthermore, Yi Xiaonan's martial artist was a genuine martial immortal, different from Yan Ji who relied on external power to support himself. Yi Xiaonan had already completely grasped the power of laws. Even his aura was extremely stable and solid. He was unexpectedly at the second heavenly layer like Chu Xiu, and not the first heavenly layer that he had just entered. Obviously, Yi Xiaonan had been breaking through for a long time, but he had been holding back and concentrating on stabilizing his realm. At this time, looking at Chu Xiu, Yi Xiaonan's eyes flashed with excitement. Chu Xiu had been in contact with Yi Xiaonan many times. Whether it was when Yi Xiaonan was besieged by the Righteous Alliance or when he seized the demonic seed, he had never seen Yi Xiaonan's emotions fluctuate so much. You actually also stepped into this realm. What Yi Xiaonan pursued was the pinnacle of power. He once thought that after stepping into the profound understanding of heaven and earth and breaking the barrier between heaven and man, he would be at the peak. In the end, when he truly reached this realm and compared it with the aura Jun Wuxian and Zhong Xinxiu showed in the past, he knew that he was still far from the peak. But today when he saw Chu Xiu, he didn't have the feeling of meeting an old friend. He only had a feeling of excitement that he was not alone after seeing someone of the same trade. Yi Xiaonan reached out and grabbed. He didn't directly greet Chu Xiu, but his grab directly tore the void around Chu Xiu. A storm immediately swept towards Chu Xiu. Chapter 1297. Yi Xiaonan's sudden attack didn't carry any killing intent. It was obvious that he hadn't fought with an existence in the martial immortal realm since his breakthrough, so he wanted to try the real power of the rule. Chu Xiu suddenly stepped forward, and boundless sharpness bloomed around him. But looking closely, those sharpness were like blades, tearing the surrounding storm apart and using the power of the rule to counteract the power of the rule. At the next moment, the surrounding torn space started to close up, but Chu Xiu was forcefully trapped within it. After Yi Xiaonan entered the martial immortal realm and merged with the power of the rule, the power of the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra became even more varied than before. Chu Xiu used his palm as a blade, and the power of the rule twisted into a line in his hand. It slashed down like an extreme blade, and in an instant heaven and earth were torn apart. Yi Xiaonan only used these 2 moves to test his power, and then he didn't attack again. He stared at Chu Xiu and said, "I'm surprised that you can reach this realm. In terms of power you aren't any worse than me." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "There are many accidents in this world. It's not surprising that I ran into one. But hierarchy, your habit of attacking first is not good. You have to change it." Yi Xiaonan ignored Chu Xiu's teasing. He waved his hand and a stone stool rose under him and Chu Xiu at the same time. After sitting down he asked, Why are you looking for me? Chu Xiu also sat down and said in a deep voice, join forces with the moon-worshipping cult to attack the gate of heaven and kill Jun Wuxian. There was no surprise in Yi Xiaonan's eyes. He just looked up at Chu Xiu and said two words, reason. In the past he had promised Chu Xiu to help him as a shield, just to see Jun Wuxian attack. But at that time what he pursued was the martial immortal realm. Now that Yi Xiaonan had reached this realm, he also knew that martial immortal was not the peak. However, he relied on himself to cultivate step by step to reach this stage. In the lower realm, he relied on himself to break through the barrier between heaven and man and become a martial celestial. It was not something that Yan Ji, who relied on external objects to become a false martial celestial, could compare to. Therefore Yi Xiaonan was not Yan Ji. He was very clear about his own future and his own path ahead. He no longer needed to observe others to advance. He was the moon-worshipping cult leader, so he naturally had to consider the entire moon-worshipping cult when it came to such a big matter. The east and west heavens, the incomparably mysterious and powerful heavenly gates, were not easy to attack. Chu Xiu extended two fingers and said, I have two reasons. First, has Cult Master Yi heard of where the cultivators went during the great calamity of the ancient era? Yi Xiaonan nodded and said, vaguely. This kind of thing was just a legend for other Jianghu people, but for a powerhouse like Yi Xiaonan who stood at the peak of the Jianghu, it was not a rare thing. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, then I will tell you a piece of news now. The heavenly gates were left behind by the ancient cultivators in the past to guard the passage between the two realms. The heavenly gates, as the name suggests, are the gates to heaven. The other heaven is stronger than the lower realm's primordial qi, and it is closer to heaven than the lower realm. As long as the heavenly gates are destroyed and the formation is destroyed, the primordial qi of the other heaven will seep into the lower realm. Cult Master Yi, you should know what will happen when the time comes. Hearing this, Yi Xiaonan's eyes could not help but reveal a look of surprise. Of course, he knew that this would create a new golden age of martial arts. Of course, there was one thing that Chu Xiu did not say. As long as the formation in the lower realm was damaged, the formation on the Daluotian side should not be able to hold on for long. Therefore, after the golden age of martial arts, it might cause the Daluotian and the lower realm to be connected. But it did not matter. Chu Xiu had already enjoyed the benefits of the Daluotian. The cultivators under his command had all ushered in a wave of surge in strength in the Daluotian. After adapting to the primordial qi of the heaven and earth, their cultivation speed had also become flat. Although it was still faster than the lower realm, there would not be such a surge. Therefore, now Chu Xiu only wanted to destroy the heavenly gates and the yang ability source in the heavenly gates. Other things were not within the scope of his consideration. Chu Xiu continued, as for the second reason, that is that the master of the heavenly gates, Jun Wuxian, has been seriously injured. Yi Xiaonan looked at Chu Xiu with a trace of doubt. The heavenly gates rarely stepped out of Jianghu. It should be said that the heavenly gates was the most mysterious sect in Jianghu. So, how did Chu Xiu know that Jun Wuxian had been seriously injured? Chu Xiu smiled and said, I know that what I said now is empty talk and there is no evidence. But I still have some credibility in Jianghu. At least I did not deceive the moon-worshipping cult and cult master Yi. There is still a long time before the general attack on the heavenly gates. I think that it is not only the moon-worshipping cult that will cooperate with us. When the time comes, the moon-worshipping cult can bring people to see if what I said is true. If what I said is false, cult master Yi can just turn around and leave with your people. It is also fine. Yi Xiaonan only hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, yes. Although Yi Xiaonan did not need to seek a breakthrough in order to fight with Jun Wuxian, he did not want to give up the opportunity to fight with an expert like Jun Wuxian. At this time, the moon-worshipping cult's high priest hurriedly walked over and said, Cult master, it's bad. The holy maiden's spirit was swallowed by the longevity goo. I'm afraid that she can't survive the inheritance this time. Yi Xiaonan frowned, his figure moved, and he directly disappeared on the spot. The moon-worshipping cult's high priest looked at Chu Xiu somewhat awkwardly. The guest was still here and the cult master left. What about Chu Xiu? I also have a lot of dealings with your moon-worshipping cult's holy maiden. How about letting me go and take a look? Chu Xiu suddenly said. Since this matter was already known by Chu Xiu, then there was nothing to hide. The moon-worshipping cult's high priest also directly brought Chu Xiu to a secret room in the back mountain of the moon-worshipping cult. At this time, in that secret room, not only Yi Xiaonan and Dong Huangtai were there, but also a true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist was also there. Moon-worshipping cult's holy maiden was currently sitting cross-legged in the center with her eyes closed. Her whole body was drenched in sweat, and her expression was very painful. Yi Xiaonan frowned and said, "Great Ming, what's the situation?" That true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist was Great Ming of moon-worshipping cult's 9 great magus priests. He was most proficient in primordial spirit secret techniques. Hearing this, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Cult master, I'm afraid the Holy Maiden is in danger this time. Actually, with the Holy Maiden's talent and mental state, she is one of the best among the previous Holy Maidens. But the longevity goo has been passed down for so long, and it has accumulated too many Holy Maiden's imprints. Now that it erupted in one go during the inheritance, let alone the Holy Maiden, I'm afraid that even I can't withstand it. Longevity goo, this goo worm, can't be used in the future. No one can withstand this impact. In other words, those who can withstand this impact don't need the longevity goo to carry on the inheritance." Everyone present furrowed their brows. Even Dong Huang Tai, who was not used to moon-worshipping cult's Holy Maiden, who was born in Miao region, was the same. After all, this was the Holy Maiden of moon-worshipping cult, and they had watched her grow up. It would be fine if she died in the pugilistic world, but her death here was worthless. At that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "If everyone trusts me, I can make a move and save your sect's holy daughter." Dong Huang Tai looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. He knew that Chu Xiu was strong, but was he also good in this aspect? Great Ming was even more direct. "Cult Master Chu's name shakes the pugilistic world, we all know this. But the longevity goo has already fused with the Holy Maiden's primordial spirit. It's not enough to remove the power of the goo with just the power of the primordial spirit, or else the Holy Maiden will still die." Chapter 1298. The moon-worshipping cult holy girl could guess that Yi Xiaonan and others would find a way to save her when she was in trouble. But she didn't expect that the person who saved her would be Chu Xiu. In fact, although the moon-worshipping cult holy girl and Chu Xiu had a friendship, this friendship was not too deep. Moreover, since Chu Xiu rebuilt the Kunlun Devil cult in Kunlun Mountain, the two sides were no longer on the same level. At this time, seeing that it was actually Chu Xiu who made a move, she still felt a little complicated. Don't just stand there, quickly accept the inheritance power in longevity goo. Otherwise, if it is wasted, you will have experienced such a dangerous situation in vain. Hearing this, the moon-worshipping cult holy girl quickly calmed down and began to absorb the power in longevity goo. After the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet removed all the imprints in the longevity goo, the aura of the moon-worshipping cult holy girl also began to skyrocket. The moon-worshipping cult holy girl was a martial artist of the same era as Chu Xiu. The martial artists of that era, not including monsters like Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian, had already stepped into the true fire spiritual refinement realm. Even those ranked in the top dozens on the Longhu list had already stepped into the real pellet state, becoming the mainstay of various sections. The strength of the moon-worshipping cult holy girl could definitely be ranked in the top 10, but she had always maintained the realm of unity of man and nature. From then on, Chu Xiu felt something was wrong. At this time, the aura of the moon-worshipping cult holy girl skyrocketed from the unity of man and nature to the real pellet state, true fire spiritual refinement realm, and even to the heaven and earth mystic connecting realm before stopping. Moreover, the aura on her body was not weak at all. Instead, it was extremely stable as if she had been in this realm for a long time. This was the effect of the longevity goo. It was indeed miraculous. While inheriting strength and martial path, it could even inherit the comprehension of realms. However, the martial artists of the heaven and earth mystic connecting realm, such as the high priest and Dong Huang Tai, saw the cultivation of the moon-worshipping cult holy girl rising to the same level as them in an instant. Their expressions didn't change. This kind of thing was not enviable. After being consumed by longevity goo, the holy girl of each generation could not live more than 100 years old, and some even died at the age of a few decades. They would rather cultivate hard in exchange for the strength of the heaven and earth mystic connecting realm. After a long while, the holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult opened her eyes. She stretched out her hand, and in her hand was a round black insect. Chu Xiu couldn't see its head or tail, and if it weren't for the fact that it was still trembling, he would have thought it was dead. This seemingly inconspicuous thing was the longevity goo that created so many generations of moon-worshipping cult saints. Yi Xiaonan flicked her finger and powerful astral qi instantly shattered that longevity goo. Dong Huang Tai Tai and the sect-worshipping saint. Yi Xiaonan said plainly, From today onwards, my moon-worshipping cult will no longer need longevity goo. Saintess, write down all the goo techniques in your inheritance and store them in the scripture pavilion. The holy girl nodded, yes, sect master. With that, the holy maiden of the moon-worshipping church bowed to Chu Xiu and said with a smile, thank you for your help, sect master Chu. Moon-worshipping cult saintess was a heavenly beauty to begin with. After receiving the longevity goo inheritance, her temperament changed even more. She became spirited and charming, like a fairy born from Miaozhang's myriad mountains, charming but not evil. Chu Xiu said, don't thank me yet, I have a price for saving you. Cult master Yi also agreed to it just now. After I save you, you have to do something for me in the future. The holy girl showed a charming smile and looked at Chu Xiu coquettishly, Cult master Chu saved me. Not to mention one thing, I can do 10 things for you. I will do whatever cult master Chu wants me to do. Dong Huang Tai was a little old-fashioned and couldn't stand the saintess of moon-worshipping cult the most. He couldn't help but cough and frown. Pay attention to your image. Cult master Chu is here. Don't embarrass my moon-worshipping cult. The saintess of the moon-worshipping cult immediately put away her flirtatious look. She put her hands on her waist, raised her eyebrows at Dong Huang Tai and said, Cult leader Chu didn't say anything, so how dare you make irresponsible remarks here? Besides, don't all men like this? Now I am the same as you, I have stepped into heaven and earth elemental opening. If you are not convinced, let's go outside and practice. In moon-worshipping cult, the holy girl's position has always been above the 9 great magi. Provoked by her, Dong Huang Tai said angrily, enough. Yi Xiaonan shouted in a low voice, and suddenly everyone was well-behaved, shrinking to the side. Yi Xiaonan rubbed her head, seeming to have a headache. Excuse me. Chu Xiu smiled. It seems that people in moon-worshipping cult are also sentimental people, it's no big deal. Since this is the case, I am going to leave. I still have people to visit in West Chu. Moon-worshipping cult saintess asked, where is Lord Chu going? Chu Xiu looked to the west and said lightly, to the Taoist master's mansion, to visit the old Taoist master. Outside the Taoist master's mansion, when the people heard that Chu Xiu had come to visit, they all panicked. It was no wonder that the Taoist master's mansion was in such a state. It was just that Chu Xiu's deterrence was a bit too great. After the destruction of the Storm Sword Tomb, everyone in the Jianghu knew that Chu Xiu had taken the last step and surpassed the peak of heaven and earth elemental enlightenment. Most cultivators didn't know that there were 9 heavens of martial immortal. In their opinion, Chu Xiu was on the same level as Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, so everyone was in a constant state of anxiety. As a righteous sect, they didn't know why Chu Xiu had come here, but it was definitely not something good. Seeing everyone's panicked appearance, the old Taoist master couldn't help but scold, you cowards, what are you panicking for? No matter what, I have lived for hundreds of years. How can Chu Xiu, the leader of a demonic sect, put down his face to bully an old man like me? Go invite him up. Don't be rude. Zhang Qingjin carefully glanced at the old Taoist master. Why does the old Taoist master's words sound like he's taking advantage of his seniority? This time, the old Taoist master didn't receive Chu Xiu in the courtyard at the back of the mountain, but in the main hall of the Celestial Master Mansion. Chu Xiu walked into the hall with a smile on his face. He cupped his hands and said, Old Taoist master, it's been a long time. You're still as healthy as ever. It looks like living another 100 or 200 years won't be a problem. The old Taoist master shook his head and said, I'm afraid I'll be struck by lightning even if I live another 100 or 200 years. Who knows when I'll die? After living for so many years, I've already accepted it. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, is that so? If you become a martial immortal, it won't be difficult for you to live another 100 or 200 years, right? Chu Xiu's words made the old Taoist master tremble. He said in surprise, what did you say? Chu Xiu said calmly, in the past I was too weak to see through you, old Taoist master. But in truth you've been a genius since you were young. You've been at the peak of the profound understanding realm for over 100 years, so why haven't you become a martial immortal? I know it's not that easy to break through the martial immortal realm, but with your strength and the power of the entire Celestial Master Mansion, it shouldn't be difficult for you to find a natural treasure and use it as an opportunity, right? After all these years, I can only see through a portion of the power you've accumulated. I can't even see through the rest. If you want to become a martial immortal now, you should be able to do so. But why not? Even the others from the Celestial Master Mansion looked at the old Taoist master after hearing Chu Xiu's words. They didn't know the old Taoist master had such strength. The old Taoist master sighed and pointed to himself. Cult Master Chu, you're actually very enviable. Young people are always enviable. I'm already a person from the previous era. So what if I've lived longer? I'm still just an old man. You're right. I've actually already accumulated enough power over 100 years ago. I already had the opportunity and comprehension to become a martial immortal. But I didn't dare to do so. Cult Master Chu, since you've become a martial immortal, you should know how intense the natural energy is when you make a breakthrough to the martial immortal realm. When the natural energy from the outside world surges into my body, the natural energy in my body will affect the laws of the world, causing my body and soul to be rejuvenated. I can no longer withstand the impact. What a pity. I could have done it several decades earlier, but by the time I had the ability to do so, my body couldn't allow it anymore. Perhaps when I really can't take it anymore, I'll attempt to make a breakthrough. Even if I can only experience the feeling of becoming a martial immortal for an instant, it'll be worth it. Although the old Taoist master sounded a little regretful, he had already gotten over it after so many years. At the same time, there was also a hint of threat in his words. Although he would never be able to make a breakthrough to the martial immortal realm in his lifetime, if he was forced into a corner, he would be able to unleash the battle prowess of a martial immortal even if his body couldn't withstand it. Chu Xiu said with a deep voice, "Old Taoist master, you're wrong. The most important aspect of becoming a martial immortal is your ability to comprehend the power of laws. As for the impact to your body when you reach the martial immortal realm, although there will be some, if you find a place with an abundance of essence and only absorb the powerful essence to cleanse your body, and use the power within your body to activate the laws, you will not cleanse your body, but rather use it to guide the flow of energy. With that, as long as your body hasn't completely decayed, you will be able to endure it." The old Taoist master forced a smile and said, "You make it sound simple, but where can I find such a blessed land in the pugilistic world? At any rate, I've never heard of any place with such an abundance of natural energy." "There is." "Where?" "The heavenly gates." Chu Xiu did not continue to keep the old Taoist master in suspense. He simply repeated what he had told Yi Xiaonan to the old Taoist master. The celestial master's mansion was established earlier than the moon-worshipping church. As such, they knew more about the Daluotian secrets than the moon-worshipping church. Most importantly, Yi Xiaonan had become a martial immortal, whereas the old Taoist master had been stuck at that bottleneck for over 100 years. The impact he had received was even greater than Yi Xiaonan. Chapter 1299. Although the old celestial master's expression didn't change much after hearing about Chu Xiu's news, it took him a long time to digest it. The old celestial master heaved a sigh of relief and said, "So you're going to join forces with the celestial master abode to attack the heavenly gate?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's right. Of course, it's not just the celestial master abode. I just left the moon-worshipping cult. I'm going to mobilize the entire pugilistic world this time. Therefore, I came to deliver this news to you in hopes that the celestial master abode can restrain themselves during this period. If I want to mobilize the entire pugilistic world, my methods may not be so gentle. When the time comes, someone might come to the celestial master abode and ask them to stand up for me." Chu Xiu chose to personally visit the moon-worshipping cult and the celestial master abode not only because of Yi Xiaonan and the old celestial master's strength, but also because there were not many forces in the lower realm that could truly threaten him. The North and South Buddhist sects had been destroyed. Chu Xiu didn't care about the remaining remnants. The only ones left were the Devil Dao's moon-worshipping cult and the Taoism's celestial master abode. Therefore, Chu Xiu went to them first to ensure his sincerity and also to avoid trouble. The old celestial master heaved a sigh of relief and said, "But I still have one thing that I'm very confused about. According to what you said, as long as the heavenly gate is breached, the Daluotian's power will seep into the lower realm. We can all benefit from it. What can you, Cult Master Chu, get?" To put it bluntly, you, Cult Master Chu, have never been a charitable person. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "I only want two things. The first is the collection that the heavenly gate has accumulated over the years. I want all of them. I was the one who planned to attack the heavenly gate, so I'm not going to give these things to others. The second is Jun Wuxian's life. Old Celestial Master, you should know that I was plotted against in the rift created by the battle between Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. I almost died there. Old Celestial Master, you should be able to guess who the culprit was." The old Celestial Master nodded. He was not the only one who knew. Back then, many people had guessed that it was Jun Wuxian who did it. Other than him, no one else had the ability or reason to do so. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Old Heavenly Master, I attacked the Heavenly Gate for personal gain and personal grudges, but it was also beneficial to the entire pugilistic world. The Heavenly Gates had blocked the seal of the upper and lower realms for so many years, and they had used the benefits to create many powerhouses. You only know that Elysium has 9 divine generals, and the weakest is at the true fire god refinement state, but do you know that Elysium also has a secret realm where disciples are secretly trained? The weakest among them is at the real pellet state. For so many years, the Elysium had been like raising venomous insects, allowing them to fight among themselves. The 9 great divine generals were the best among them. Do you know how many children in the world have gone missing, far away from their parents? Moreover, when the people of Elysium went out to look for the heavenly key, they would easily destroy their families. Their methods were cruel and their crimes were innumerable. The great hero Chu Kuanga, whom I respected the most in the past, died in the hands of the Elysium's divine generals. The former chief hall master of the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Xiu, who cultivated me, also died in the hands of the Elysium's divine generals. If the Elysium is not eliminated, the evil in the pugilistic world will not be eliminated. Old Celestial Master, join forces with me to eliminate the Elysium, and at the same time, get rid of the evil in the pugilistic world." Chu Xiu's words were righteous, and his whole body seemed to be blooming with light. However, many of the martial artists of the Celestial Master Mansion present were speechless. Who in the entire pugilistic world didn't know who Chu Xiu, Cult Master Chu, was? The person the cult master of a cult respected the most was the great hero Chu Kuanga? What a joke. Moreover, everyone knew that Chu Xiu was already at odds with Guan Xiu when they were in the Guanzhong torture room. After Guan Xiu's death, he even more wantonly eliminated dissidents and occupied the Guanzhong torture room with extremely forceful methods. At that time, no one could see that Chu Xiu respected Guan Xiu in the slightest. However, although they didn't believe Chu Xiu's words, they had vaguely heard about the Elysium. The Elysium was not a demon, but the things they did were still intolerable to the righteous and pugilistic world. Of course, even if they couldn't tolerate it before, they still had to. Otherwise, even if Jun Wuxian didn't appear, if the 9 great divine generals of Elysium attacked at the same time, how many people in pugilistic world could stop them? The old Celestial Master heaved a sigh of relief and said, "When are you going to attack the Elysium? Just give the Celestial Master Mansion a message. After you leave, the Celestial Master Mansion will seal the mountain and won't see anyone." A smile appeared at the corner of Chu Xiu's mouth. He knew that the old Celestial Master had agreed. Chu Xiu cupped his fist and said, "Old Celestial Master, please rest assured that I only came to destroy the Elysium this time. For the interests of other sects, as long as they don't block my way, I won't touch them." After speaking, Chu Xiu suddenly looked at Zhang Qingjin next to the old Celestial Master. "Brother Zhang, why do you people always like to play the trick of accumulating? Isn't it good to cultivate step by step?" Among the Longhu list of Chu Xiu's generation, Zhang Qingjin was the first to step into the real pellet state, and he was also the most dazzling young talent in that generation. But later, with the rise of Chu Xiu and others, the name of Zhang Qingjin was gradually forgotten. It was just that with Zhang Qingjin's talent, he had been cultivating hard in the Celestial Master Mansion for so many years, but he was still only at the real pellet state. This was obviously wrong. In the past, Chu Xiu couldn't see anything, but now he could clearly feel that Zhang Qingjin's body contained an extremely strong thunderbolt power, especially in his dantian. Chu Xiu could no longer detect the existence of martial Dao real pellet. Instead, it was replaced by a powerful thunderbolt. Zhang Qingjin smiled when he heard the words, "Brother Chu, I can't catch up with you, so I can only take some shortcuts. The big road leads to the sky, but there are too many people. The shortcuts can also lead to the peak. Feels good." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Brother Zhang is bold. You and the Holy Virgin of the Moon-worshipping cult are very compatible. Old Celestial Master Brother Zhang, then I will leave." After speaking, Chu Xiu turned and left, leaving only Zhang Qingjin feeling a little confused. What does the Holy Virgin of the Moon-worshipping cult have to do with him? Looking at Chu Xiu's back as he left, the old Celestial Master couldn't help but sigh. "I'm afraid the pugilistic world is going to be chaotic again." But then again, when was the pugilistic world truly peaceful? Perhaps this is the real pugilistic world. Go and notify them to seal the mountain. Seal the front and back mountains. Tell those who come to pray and burn incense to come again in a few months. During this period of time, the Celestial Master Mansion will not see anyone. After returning to the Daluotian continent, he had been busy in the lower realm for a long time. The other Daluotian celestial masters had all come out of seclusion. Among them, only Lu Jiang he had successfully stepped into the half-step martial immortal realm because he had witnessed the evolution of the power of rules. Although Shang Qianliang's harvest was not small, he was still unable to break through the bottleneck of the martial immortal realm. However, he was only a step away. Although Lu Fengxian and Mei Qinglian's strength had greatly increased, they were still unable to reach the half-step martial immortal realm. After everyone came out of their seclusion, Chu Xiu informed them about what had happened. Immediately they all opened their eyes wide. They had only been in closed-door training for less than 2 months. Yet Chu Xiu had actually managed to rope Qinqing Di to his side. That said, this was also a good thing. After all, Qinqing Di's strength spoke for itself. Furthermore, he also had the World Alliance with him. Wei Shuya pinched the strand of beard on his chin. With a deep voice, he said, "In other words, we can attack the heavenly gates now?" Chu Xiu nodded. He said, "We can. However, I do not wish to lose too many of my subordinates. After attacking the heavenly gates, as long as I take away the extreme yang source energy from the heavenly gates, the spirit formation will definitely loosen up. At that time, the natural energy that will seep out will benefit the entire pugilistic world. Since that's the case, we cannot just sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. I have already contacted the moon-worshipping church and the celestial master's mansion. They will act. At the same time, I will also contact the wind-sweeping pavilion and have them spread rumors. They will instigate a large number of loose cultivators and small sects to act." Wei Shuya said solemnly, "But it's only a few small sections. Most of the other sects value stability more than anything else. Even if you pass the news to them, they most likely won't respond. After all, they will benefit from you attacking the heavenly gates. If you fail, they will not be harmed. If they participate, the risk will be the greatest." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Thus, it is not a good thing to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. I plan to send my subordinates to West Chu, Eastern Qi, Northern Yen and even overseas. I want them to gather their forces and attack the heavenly gates. Those that are obedient will join the alliance. As for those that are disobedient, you can do as you see fit. In any case, I'll leave them to you." In the entire pugilistic world, only the moon-worshipping church and the celestial master's mansion could attract Chu Xiu's attention. Therefore, Chu Xiu had personally visited these 2 sections. As for the remaining sects, if Chu Xiu visited them personally, it would be looking down on them too much. Looking at the people around him, Chu Xiu made a decision. Mei Qinglian would go to Northern Yen, Chu Wuji would go to West Chu, Lu Jiang he would go to Eastern Qi and Lu Fengxian would go overseas. Lu Jiang he could not help but curl his lips and say, "Great cult leader Chu, you are going a little too far. You are leaving the hardest bone to chew to me?" Actually, Chu Xiu had considered this. Old Wei and Shang Tianliang were too strong. It would be a waste to let them go, so there was no need. The Northern Yen was Chu Xiu's base camp. The forces that were presentable were either on Chu Xiu's side or had been destroyed. Therefore, it was not difficult for Mei Qinglian to go. It was almost the same for West Chu. The strongest sects, the moon-worshipping church and the celestial master's mansion, had been dealt with by Chu Xiu. The others were not difficult. Only Eastern Qi had the most sects and was the strongest. Chapter 1300. Inside the Eastern Qi's wind-sweeping tower. Fang Fifan and Qi Yuanli looked at the news sent by the Kunlun devil cult. They were dumbfounded. Qi Yuanli asked doubtfully, "Tower Master, is this news reliable?" Fang Fifan stared at him. "How would I know? This news is so bizarre. It's related to the Divine Gate and the ancient catastrophe that happened 10,000 years ago. No matter how I look at it, it seems like a legend." Qi Yuanli frowned and said, "I think it's a legend too. But the problem is that the Kunlun devil cult wants us to spread this news. The news that wind-sweeping tower sent out must be accurate." Fang Fifan sighed, "Order all of the wind-sweeping pavilion's branches to spread the news. Who cares if it's accurate or not? Who cares if it's a legend? Since it's that person's wish, can we still refute it?" Although Wind-Sweeping Tower was known as the world's #1 news agency and all of their news was absolutely true, in reality, they had done more than 1 or 2 things that were fence-sitters. 500 years ago, when the Kunlun devil cult dominated the world, they had sold secret information about the righteous sects to the Kunlun devil cult. And after the Kunlun devil cult was destroyed, they had sold some information about the Kunlun devil cult to the righteous sections. Now that the Kunlun devil cult had made a comeback, Chu Xiu's fist was the strongest. What else could they do other than follow his orders? With wind-sweeping tower's ability to gather information, this news had spread throughout the entire Jianghu in less than 7 days, causing a huge uproar. If this news had come from someone else's mouth, they would definitely have taken it as a joke. But now it was Wind-Sweeping Tower who said this. It had to be said that Wind-Sweeping Tower's intelligence was still highly trusted by the ordinary people in the Jianghu. Although it seemed bizarre when it came from their mouth, there were still people who were willing to believe it. Of course, most people were still skeptical. Therefore, it was up to Chu Xiu's subordinates to deal with those who were skeptical. In the northern Yan city of Yanjing, Mei Qinglian had sent out invitations in the name of the Kunlun devil cult, inviting the various sects in the northern Yan region to attend the meeting. However, no one dared to ignore an invitation from the Kunlun devil cult, and no one dared to reject it. The northern Yan martial world was where Chu Xiu first developed his influence, and the northern Yan imperial court had a close relationship with Chu Xiu. Therefore, among the 3 countries, the pressure on the northern Yan was the lowest. When the people from the major forces arrived, they were surprised to find that the person in charge was not Chu Xiu, but a beautiful woman in red, who was sitting lazily on the main seat. The martial artists of the northern Yan forces carefully communicated with each other through telepathy. One of them asked in a low voice, "Cult Master Chu didn't come? Old Master Wei Shuya didn't come either, but the Kunlun devil cult sent a woman. What is the meaning of this? Hey, don't look down on this woman. She has a powerful background. The Holy Maiden of the Yin Demon sect, a great demonic sect in the past, the successor of the Red Lotus Demon Venerable from 500 years ago, and the trusted aid of the demon sect master, Chu Xiu. Wasn't she powerful enough? Look at the people around her. They don't come with good intentions. Be careful." Hearing this, everyone noticed the people around Mei Qinglian. The leader of the Giant Spirit Gang, one of the 6 major gangs, Shen Feng, was the #1 lackey of the Kunlun devil cult in the northern Yan. He was talking to Mei Qinglian with a straight face. He didn't have the imposing manner of a gang leader or his usual sinister and ruthless demeanor. His attitude was as low as a dog's. Of course, this was normal for Shen Feng. His attitude towards Mei Qinglian was even lower than his attitude towards Chu Xiu. The cult master Chu was a man of great talent and vision. As long as he got things done, he would be fine. However, women were different. They were very narrow-minded, so he had to serve them carefully. Otherwise, he would be in trouble if he whispered something into the ears of the cult master Chu. On the other side of Mei Qinglian was Bai Wuji, the new city lord of the northern floating snow city. He was an elite of the same generation as Chu Xiu. When the northern floating snow city was destroyed, he sought refuge with the Kunlun devil cult. The northern floating snow city became a vassal of the Kunlun devil cult. Although his attitude wasn't as humble as Shen Feng's, he still followed the orders of the Kunlun devil cult. On the other side was a martial artist wearing radiant armor. He was slumped on a chair and peeling bananas. After peeling, he handed one to Mei Qinglian and asked, "Do you want one?" "Swam." "Oh, it's useless to you, but it's delicious." Mei Qinglian glared at him. He took back the banana and took a bite. "JSK, you don't know what's good for you." Most people in Jianghu didn't know this person, but some people knew that he was the newly appointed general of the northern Yan, Xiang Wu, the most outstanding figure in the Xiang royal family. At this time he was also sitting here. It could be imagined what the attitude of the northern Yan imperial court was. Of course, what was more frightening was the row of Kunlun devil cult martial artists in black standing behind Mei Qinglian. There were more than a dozen of them, and all of them were at the real pellet state. Everyone present muttered in their hearts. When did the real pellet state martial Dao master become so worthless? They could only stand behind as guards. Mei Qinglian clapped her hands lightly, and the originally noisy hall suddenly quieted down. "I'm sure everyone knows why I've invited everyone here today. The existence of Elysium hinders the development of Jianghu and ignores the rules of Jianghu. It's really evil. Today my holy cult will take the lead and unite the world of Jianghu. Everyone please do your best." Mei Qinglian's beautiful eyes glanced at the people present and she said lightly, "If you don't have the strength, why are you still in Jianghu? Go home and coax your children." There was a commotion in the crowd. Obviously, they were a little dissatisfied with Mei Qinglian's overbearing words. Glancing at the people present as Mei Qinglian's gaze swept across, the hall suddenly became quiet again. "Okay, that's all I want to say. My eloquence is not as good as my holy cult's cult master Chu. I have brought the news. If everyone has no objections, then wait for my holy cult's news and be ready to attack Elysium at any time." Now who has any objections? At this time, a tall and burly martial artist with 3 strands of long beard stood up and said in a deep voice, I have another question. Kunlun Devil Cult is powerful. If they ask us to take action, we don't dare to refute. But if we can take action, what benefits can we get afterward? Elysium, as one of the 2 heavens, has countless treasures. How to distribute these things? There should be a rule, right? Also, sir, what is your position in Kunlun Devil Cult? Why don't I see Cult Master Chu? Is your promise still valid, my lord? Everyone present had a look of surprise in their eyes. This person really dared to speak. However, what he wanted to ask was actually what they wanted to know. Now that Kunlun Devil Cult was powerful in the pugilistic world, they no longer cared about the so-called good and evil. They would listen to whoever's fist was bigger. But the problem was, they could listen to him, but what benefits would they get? Mei Qinglian glanced at him and asked, who is this guy? Shen Feiying immediately went forward and said quickly, one of the 6 major gangs, the Chang'e Gang's leader, heart-destroying Iron Hand Yu Fengwei. 1.5 years ago, he officially became one of the 6 major gangs and replaced the Morale Congregation. Mei Qinglian nodded her head. In the next moment, she snapped her fingers and a scarlet flame bloomed from Yu Fengwei's body. It was as if a red lotus had bloomed. It was incomparably bright. Yu Fengwei only had time to let out a blood-curdling scream before his entire body was burnt to ashes. The entire place was deathly silent, and everyone's eyes were filled with shock and terror. No one would have thought that this seemingly beautiful woman would kill someone without any warning. Moreover, they could not understand the power of the Red Lotus Hellfire. Mei Qinglian's beautiful eyes revealed a hint of anger. She said coldly, reckless fools, I'm just asking you symbolically. How dare you stand up and question me? I'll tell you what this guy risked his life to get out of me. Breaking through the divine gate, destroying the formation, and letting the upper realm's vitality permeate the entire pugilistic world, the whole of pugilistic world will benefit from it. How dare you covet the divine gate's treasures? Everything belongs to the Holy Church. In a place like Northern Yen, my words are the same as Cult Master Chu's words. Xiangwu grinned. Sure enough, women don't mean what they say. If you take it seriously, your end will be very miserable. Mei Qinglian turned to the Kunlun demon cult disciples behind her and said, make a trip to that Zhangla sect. Tell the others in the Zhangla sect that in the future, there will be no more Zhangla sect in the Northern Yen Jianghu. Those who want to live, join other gangs. The Giant Spirit Gang or the Drifting Snow City in the extreme north are both good choices. Those who want to be loyal, send them to see their gang master. Yes. Immediately, a few real Pellet State Kunlun Devil Cult martial artists walked out as if they were executing a trivial matter. Mei Qinglian glanced around. Now, who else has any doubts? No. We will do whatever the Holy Maiden says. The sins of the Elysium are too numerous to be recorded. It is a blessing for the underworld to have our Holy Church enforce justice on behalf of heaven. In just a few words, the Chang'e Gang, one of the 6 major gangs, was gone. Who dared to have doubts? Even if you want to die, you shouldn't do it in such a way. It's good that there are no doubts. You are all dismissed. Mei Qinglian waved her hand casually, and the people present rushed out of the hall as if they were running for their lives. Xiangwu couldn't help but shake his head when he saw this scene. The Northern Yen martial arts world was completely ruined. There was no one with backbone. Yu Fengwei didn't have backbone. It could only be said that he was blinded by greed. In addition, he became one of the 6 major gangs and couldn't see himself clearly. Of course, this was a good thing for the Northern Yen court because the Northern Yen martial arts world was easier to manage. Thinking of this, Xiangwu glanced at Mei Qinglian with some surprise. He knew little about Mei Qinglian. When he saw that Chu Xiu actually sent a woman to the Northern Yen, he was a little puzzled. As a result, it seemed that this woman was really ruthless. Xiangwu couldn't help but shake his head and whisper, Wasp-tail needle the most? Before he finished speaking, he was glared at by Mei Qinglian. What did you say? Xiangwu quickly changed his words. Wasp-tail needle, the most beautiful holy maiden heart. I'm praising you. When I came, His Majesty said that the Northern Yen court will follow the Holy Church's lead. When you want to take action, just let me know. With that said, Xiangwu swallowed the last mouthful of banana and hurriedly ran out. Chapter 1301. Compared with the Northern Yen martial world, where Mei Qinglian had to kill people to control the situation, Chu Wuji was more relaxed in West Chu. Although the West Chu martial world was not weak, the World Alliance had merged with the Kunlun Devil cult. The moon-worshipping cult and the Taoist master mansion had joined hands with Chu Xiu at the same time. Only the Forgetful Sword Hut could show up. However, the Forgetful Sword Hut was very calm. They did not want to offend Chu Xiu at this time, so they also kept a low profile. Only a small part of the West Chu martial world did not come, and that was a part of the martial arts forces in Sichuan. The land of Bashu was also in the West Chu, but it was the westernmost part of the country. The road there was difficult to travel, so the main forces led by the Tang family didn't refuse. Instead, they asked Chu Wuji to wait for a while, but in fact they were secretly discussing something. After receiving the news, Chu Wuji chuckled and shook his head. He called Tangya over. "You should know about the Tang family fortress, so I won't meddle in it. You can take some people with you and untie the knot in your heart." Tangya's expression changed slightly, but he still shook his head and said, "No need. The Holy Church's plan is the priority. When the Tang family fortress sends people over, we can deal with them together. I will waste too much time going back and forth. Besides, as I said, the past is like smoke. These years I have been fighting with the hierarch, facing the alliance of the righteous sects, the big Taoist and Buddhist sects, and even the ancient powerhouses of another world. If I'm still fixated on those filthy things of the past, then I'll be the one who can't be seen in public." Chu Wuji laughed and said, "It's good that you think like that. But if you don't return to your hometown after getting rich, it's like wearing silk clothes at night. In this life, people should strive for dignity instead of fighting for it. I want my face and so do you, Tangya. Actually, I have vaguely heard about what happened to you in the past. Of course, I didn't mean to inquire about it. Among the Yinma clan there are some warriors from Sichuan. Don't worry, you have plenty of time. This time the cult leader is going to attack the Heavenly Gate. What he's playing is not a conspiracy but an open conspiracy. He needs to gather the power of the entire Jianghu before he can take action. He doesn't need your time. We have roamed the Jianghu for our entire lives. If we can't even settle debts of gratitude and enmity as we please, how aggrieved would that be? Moreover, the sect master also knows about this matter. You coming to West Chu with me was personally ordered by the sect master." Tangya couldn't help but be stunned when he heard this, but his eyes revealed a wisp of being moved. "Thank you, my lord." When Tangya walked out of the door, Yen Bugue was standing at the door waiting for him. "I'll go to Sichuan with you later." Tangya was flabbergasted. "Why are you following me? Lord Chu has already given me enough men." Yen Bugue patted Tangya on the shoulder and said, "I'll help you kill someone." Yen Bugue was a man of few words. Although he only said 4 words, from his eyes, Tangya understood what he meant. He was worried about him. He was afraid that when Tangya faced his past, he wouldn't be able to do it. Among the people of the Kunlun devil cult, Tangya and Yen Bugue were the first to know each other. When Chu Xiu was still in the beginner's village, the two of them were already the gold medal assassins of the Heavenly Sin branch. Later on, although no one said anything, both sides knew that they were each other's most important friends. Thinking of Chu Xiu's arrangements and what Chu Wuji had said, as well as Yen Bugue's company, he couldn't help rubbing his eyes. I say, do you really have to make the atmosphere so emotional? Aren't we supposed to be cold-blooded and heartless people of the devil cult? This doesn't match our identities." Yen Bugue didn't reply. He just carried his heavy sword and followed behind Tangya. Half a month later, Sichuan Province, Tang Family Fortress. Shu Road was difficult. It was more difficult than going to heaven. Even though the weakest person brought by Tangya was at the real pellet state, it took them half a month to arrive. After all, real pellet state couldn't fly and could easily cross those natural barriers. Looking at the Tang family fortress in front of him, Tangya's eyes showed a look of remembrance. He could never forget how he had been chased out of the Tang family fortress like a stray dog. His real name was not Tangya but Tang Dongting. He was a direct descendant of the Tang family fortress, but he was born of a concubine. His father was the previous owner of the Tang clan castle, Tang Beifei. He was a famous good-for-nothing who had never successfully forged a concealed weapon in his life. He couldn't even learn a fraction of the Tang sect's secret technique, the flying star seizing the moon. The composition of the Tang family fortress was somewhat unique. It was said to be a family, but in fact for many generations, the Tang sect had begun to recruit hidden weapon masters and some craftsmen who made hidden weapons. They married them and made them part of the Tang family fortress. This way, although the strength of the Tang family fortress skyrocketed and its reputation rose, it also caused the direct descendants of the Tang family fortress to completely decline. So later the Tang family fortress had a rule. The Tang family fortress lord had to be a direct descendant, but the ones in charge were the elders of the Tang family fortress, consisting of a dozen elders from each branch. His mother was the concubine of the previous fortress lord, Tang Beifei, but he was born with great talent in hidden weapons, so the elders of the Tang family fortress liked him and wanted to make him the next fortress lord. However, Tang Beifei's legal wife, who was also his aunt, was jealous of him and framed him for destroying one of the Tang sect's most precious hidden weapons, the dancing fish dragon. As a result, he was punished by the council of elders and his mother died of depression. His father was useless and did not care about him. In the end, because he was a direct descendant of the Tang sect, the elders were ready to expel him from the Tang sect. But they also found a place for him to go, and that was to let him enter the Ba Mountain Sword sect, which was a place of protection. But in the end, his aunt was still worried, and bribed a disciple of the Ba Mountain Sword sect to harm him. This made Tangya despair and he changed his name and left Bashu. He wandered the world and finally entered the Blue Dragon Society. This kind of thing was common in some large families. The only difference was that someone died and Tangya was still alive. Shaking his head, Tangya's lips curled into a cold smile. He said in a low voice, "The Holy Church has arrived at the Tang family fortress. Hurry up and welcome them." Now that Tangya had entered the true fire spirit refinement realm, his words rang out in the sky above the Tang family fortress, and the expressions of all the Tang family fortress warriors changed. The dozen or so elders of the Tang family fortress gathered together and criticized each other. Oh no, the Kunlun devil cult has come in person. This old man has already told you guys. Now that the Kunlun demon sect is making a comeback, Chu Xiu's methods are ruthless. How dare you guys dilly-dally over the invitation he sent? Can you blame me? Who was the one who said that we need to buy time and see if there are any forces in the world that want to resist the Kunlun devil cult? Stop talking nonsense. Let's go out and take a look. Amidst the noise, the gates of the Tang family fortress opened, and a dozen Tang family elders walked out, followed by hundreds of Tang family fortress warriors. The leading Tang family fortress elder, whose hair and beard were all white, had a humble smile on his face. I did not know that the envoys of the Kunlun devil cult had arrived. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. May I know how to address you? Tangya said lightly, I am Tangya, the hall master of the Blood Fang Hall. Tangya was not a hall master before, but after he came to the Dalu Ocean, the strength of the warriors under the Kunlun devil cult had soared. Therefore, Chu Xiu asked Tangya to set up a hall alone and become the hall master. Anyway, as long as he did not die in the future, he could reach the heaven and earth metaphysic realm. In fact, Yen Bugue also had the qualifications to become a hall master, but he was not good at management. Therefore, he had been staying with Tangya's Blood Fang Hall. The Tang family fortress elder had a surprised smile on his face. I did not expect the hall master to also have the surname Tang. This is really fate. Tangya smiled insincerely. Of course it is fate. My Tang is from Sichuan. I am the same Tang as Tang Zizai, the hidden weapon grandmaster of Sichuan 5,000 years ago. All the Tang sect elders were stunned. Tang Zizai was the ancestor of the Tang family fortress. Was this person also from the Tang family fortress? Among the many elders, a relatively young elder suddenly pointed at Tangya and said, You are Tang Dongting, the son of the patriarch. Tangya was, after all, Tang Beifei's biological son. Although he was only a teenager when he was chased away, his current appearance was somewhat similar to Tang Beifei's. The fact that the warriors of the Kunlun devil cult who had come with a menacing aura turned out to be one of the Tang family fortress own people was something to be happy about. But when they thought of what they had done in the past, they could not bring themselves to laugh. In particular, a middle-aged woman at the back of the crowd had a look of horror on her face. Tangya had a strange smile on his face. I did not expect the elders to recognize me. It is an honor. But remember, there is no Tang Dongting in this world. There is only Tangya of the Holy Church. By the way, where is Tang Beifei? The great elder of the Tang family fortress said cautiously, the patriarch passed away 10 years ago due to qi deviation. Tangya frowned. Given his personality, why would he go and cultivate? Who is he trying to fool? Tell me the truth. The great elder of the Tang clan could only helplessly say, the patriarch did indeed pass away because of qi deviation. However, it was because he cultivated a dual cultivation secret technique. In the end, something went wrong and he suffered qi deviation. This kind of thing was not very honorable, so the Tang family fortress always said the same thing. Trash. Even dying in such a cowardly manner. Tangya spat out. The great elder of the Tang family fortress could not help but say, "He is your father after all." Tanya sneered. "My father? I have seen him no more than 10 times in the past 10 years. Every time he sees me he looks impatient. Even when I was chased out of the Tang family fortress, he was still having fun with other women." The great elder of the Tang family wanted to say something, but in the end he did not. After all, he was also aware of what happened back then. Tanya waved his hand. "All right, I am too lazy to talk about those trivial matters. I'm not here today for these things." Tanya's gaze swept across the crowd. "How dare you treat my holy church's decree as fart? No one dares not to come under my holy church's decree. Only your Tang clan fort dares to ignore my holy church's decree. Now, since you did not come, my holy church will come to you and ask you a question in person. Is your Tang family fortress looking down on the holy church of Kunlun?" Chapter 1302. No one dared to ignore the power of the Kunlun devil cult. Now that Tanya put such a big hat on them, all the martial artists of the Tang family changed their expressions. The great elder of the Tang family fort quickly said, "We don't mean that. It's just that the road is difficult, so we need to wait for a few days." Tanya sneered, "Do you think I'm an idiot? I have been in the land of Bashu for more than 10 years. I don't know what the land of Bashu is like. Others arrive in 10 days, but you can't even get there in half a month? Do you really think that the land of Bashu is isolated from the world?" Seeing Tanya approaching step by step, an elder of the Tang family fort couldn't help but stand up and pointed at Tanya. "Tang Dong Ting. What do you mean? No matter what, you are also a member of the Tang family fort, and your surname is Tang. Now the Kunlun devil cult is threatening the Tang family fort. It's fine if you don't help to persuade them, but now you are helping the Kunlun devil cult to threaten the Tang family fort. Do you still have a conscience?" Tanya opened his eyes and looked at the man. Behind Tanya, Yen Bugue's figure was like a gray stream of light, and in an instant he had already arrived in front of the elder of the Tang family fort. The elder of the Tang family fort had the strength of the real pellet state, but in front of Yen Bugue, he didn't even have a chance to make a move. Not many of the people present were able to see Yen Bugue draw his sword. All they heard was a loud explosion. Yen Bugue stood still with his sword in hand. The Tang family fort elder had already been turned into a pile of minced meat and blood. The entire place instantly turned deathly silent. Everyone kept quiet out of fear as they looked at Tanya and Yen Bugue with fear in their eyes. Looking around, Tanya said coldly, "I said I am not Tang Dong Ting, but the hall master of the Blood Fong Hall under the holy cult. Who dares to point their fingers at me? Are they tired of living?" At this moment, everyone present also understood Tanya's meaning. Today the other party was simply here to take revenge. Revenge for the hatred of the past. The great elder of the Tang family lowered his head and smiled bitterly. "Hall master, it was that woman who went too far in the past. We didn't let you down." Tanya gave a strange laugh. "Is that so? Didn't you see through that woman's clumsy scheme? Why didn't anyone from the Elders Guild, who claimed to be impartial, stop him? Because you're afraid that if a truly powerful family head emerges from the direct bloodline, it will affect the authority of your Council of Elders. That's why you wish that every generation's family head is trash like Tang Beifei, right?" Tang family's first elder said helplessly, "But that's a matter between your direct descendants. It's not good for us to interfere. Also, someone spoke for you at the time." The previous chief elder was a direct descendant. If he did not protect you, you would not even have the chance to go to Ba Mountain Sword Sect to cultivate. What about the previous great elder? "The previous great elder passed away 10 years ago," the great elder said. Tanya's expression turned cold as he said, "Since that's the case, then why are you still talking nonsense with me? Do you all think I'm here to avenge those laughable old grudges? Don't worry, I've already gotten over those things. I won't make things difficult for you. This time your Tang family fortress has disregarded the authority of the Holy Church, so we are very angry. The consequences will be severe. When we attack Sky Gate next, your Tang family fortress will be the vanguard. Didn't you not want to do anything at this time? Very well, there will be a time for you to do anything." The Tang family fortress members' expressions changed. Asking them to fight Sky Gate was no different from sending themselves to their deaths. "We can't do that, Hall Master. If we are the vanguard, the Tang family fortress will not be able to hold on." Tanya looked at the Tang family fortress members. "You want to protect the Tang family fortress?" The group of Tang family fort elders nodded in agreement. Tang Ye gave a strange smile. Seeing that my surname is also Tang, I'll give you a chance. There's still some time before we attack Skygate. In this time, do what I'm satisfied with and I'll tell the higher-ups. Tang Ye waved his hand and led the Kunlun devil cult people away. In front of the Tang family fortress, everyone stared at each other, not knowing what to do. The Tang family fortress grand elder yelled at a woman in the crowd, "Bitch! It's because you were so vicious and merciless that our Tang family is in trouble today." The woman was Tang Beifei's wife and Tang Ye's aunt. Hearing this, she didn't give in and said loudly, "If you didn't acquiesce in that matter, would I have done it? Now you're all blaming me?" In the crowd, a young martial artist who was dressed in luxurious clothes and looked somewhat similar to Tang Ye stood up and yelled angrily, "Grand Elder, what do you mean by insulting my mother?" The Tang family fortress Grand Elder frowned. "Insulting? Tang Shishing, if your mother hadn't forced away the talented Tang Dongting, would you still be the Tang family fortress master today? Tang Dongting has been wandering in the martial world for decades, and now he has become a powerhouse of the true fire spirit refinement state. He even became the hall master of the Kunlun devil cult. You trash, you swallowed so many elixirs of the Tang family fortress, but you're not even at the real pellet state. You're trash." Now that Tang Dongting wants an explanation, I'll give him an explanation. From today onwards, you're no longer the Tang family fortress master. Although Tang Shishing's mother was a woman, she had some means, so over the years she also had some confidence in the Tang family fortress. Hearing this, she shouted angrily, "How dare you!" After saying that, a group of Tang family fort disciples stood behind her. "See if I dare or not." In an instant, the entire Tang family fortress was filled with the smell of gunpowder. On the other side, Yen Bugue followed behind Tang Ye and suddenly said, "I thought you'd kill all those people." Tang Ye sneered and said, "If I kill them all, who will work for the leader? Besides, in this world there are many things more terrible than death. I know better than them what kind of people in the Tang family fortress are. Doesn't the Tang family fortress elders want to protect their power? Doesn't that bitch want to help her son to the position of the fort master? Well, now let them fight among themselves. I didn't say to what extent they fight, it's all up to them. Sometimes no price is the biggest price." Tang Ye just said it casually. He didn't care how far they could go. He didn't care about the dirty things in the Tang family fortress. If the Tang family fortress was more united, maybe there wouldn't be too much loss. However, they were not of one mind, so internal strife was inevitable. It was because Tang Ye knew them well that the whole Tang family fortress would suffer a great loss with just one sentence. At this time, Yen Bugue suddenly said behind Tang Ye, "Your style of doing things is more and more like the leader." Tang Ye was taken aback and then said with dissatisfaction, "Why are you scolding me?" In Daliang city of Eastern Qi, after Mei Qinglian and Chu Wuji had settled their matters, Lu Jianghe gathered everyone. Of course, this was not because Lu Jianghe had a problem with his abilities, but because Eastern Qi was too big. There were all kinds of names of the old powers and the new powers that had just risen. It was too much for Lu Jianghe to handle. That was why he only had enough people now. In the hall of a house in Daliang city, there were hundreds of people gathered. They were all patriarchs and sect masters of Eastern Qi. Even Lu Changlu of the Zhenwu sect and Ling Yunzi of the Chunyang Dao sect were there. Looking at the people present, Lu Jianghe coughed and put on a dignified look. He said lightly, "I guess you don't know me, so let me introduce myself first. I am the Hall Master of the Blood Demon Hall of the Holy Sect of Kunlun, Blood Sea Demon Lu Jianghe." Everyone started to discuss among themselves, and some of them even had looks of doubt in their eyes. They understood that the person in front of them was the Hall Master of the Blood Demon Hall, but why was it Blood Sea Demon? Had the Kunlun devil cult reappointed the 4 demon lords? Why could a Hall Master become a demon lord? Lu Jianghe coughed again and said, "All right, stop talking nonsense. This is not important. You just need to remember that I am Blood Sea Demon. That is enough." He had called everyone here today to discuss the matter of attacking the Elysium. The Heavenly Gates has done many evil things and broken the rules of Jianghu, and forget it. Anyway, you know that the Heavenly Gates deserve to die. So, when the time comes, all of you must do your best. If you don't, I will deal with you later. That is what happened, and that is what the situation is. Since I have conveyed the message, you may leave now. With that, Lu Jianghe stood up and was about to leave. Everyone present was dumbfounded. Are you trying to fool us like we are 3 years old? He did not even bother to come up with a proper excuse. Lu Changlu hurriedly stood up and said, Hall Master Lu, wait a minute. Is what Cult Master Chu said about the heavenly gates true? If someone else had asked Lu Jiang, he would definitely have slapped them. However, it was Lu Changlu who asked. Lu Jianghe's expression changed. He smiled and explained patiently, of course it's true. Didn't you see that West Chu's moon-worshipping cult and the Celestial Master abode didn't do anything? That's because our Cult Master Chu has already reached an agreement with the old Celestial Master and Yi Xiaonan to attack together. Even these two believe it to be true. What else is there for you to doubt? Now that he knew that the old Taoist Ning Xuanji was in the Daluo Divine Palace, Lu Jianghe did not dare to go overboard with the true martial sect. Although the old Taoist said that he only had one life of karma with the true martial sect, who knew whether he was telling the truth or not? It was better to be careful. Seeing that Lu Changlu had asked and Lu Jianghe's attitude seemed to be good, someone immediately stood up and said, "May I ask Hall Master Lu, the Kunlun Devil cult can ask us to contribute, but we can't send all of our forces, right? Our Zhou clan does not have many people. We can only send about 10 people. Please don't be offended, Hall Master Lu." Lu Jianghe looked at that person coldly and said with a sneer, "Are you trying to fool a fool? After all, you are one of the 9 great clans and you can only send 10 people? Breaking the Heavenly Gates formation is something that everyone will benefit from. It's fine if your Zhou clan is willing to send 10 people, but those who are unwilling to contribute will have their martial arts crippled. Anyway, apart from the 10 people from your Zhou clan, everyone else is useless." Chapter 1303. Lu Jianghe's sudden change in attitude caught everyone off guard. Chunyang Dao sect's Ling Yunzi stood up and frowned. "Clan leader Lu, you're going overboard. I've only heard of threats to hand someone over, but I've never heard of threats to kill. It's fine if the Kunlun Devil cult wants to touch the Heavenly Gate. No one in the pugilistic world will stop them. However, you're forcing others to do the same. Isn't that too overbearing?" Lu Jianghe glanced at Ling Yunzi and scoffed. "I was this overbearing 500 years ago. Ling Yunzi, have you not been beaten up enough by Cult Master Chu? How dare you come out and talk nonsense? Today I'll teach you what it means to be overbearing." As soon as Lu Jianghe's voice fell, the vital energy around him shot up into the sky. Boundless blood-colored threads surged over and turned into a giant hand, slapping at Ling Yunzi. The pure yang energy around Ling Yunzi shone brightly. Just as he was about to counterattack, that slap affected the qi and blood around his body, causing his movements to slow down by a step. Although it was only for an instant, the slap had already landed and sent him flying. Everyone present had a look of horror on their faces. Ling Yunzi, who was at heaven and earth elemental enlightenment, could not even take one hit from the other party? Lu Jianghe said coldly, "Remember this clearly. The Saint sect spent so much effort to get all of you here, not to ask for your suggestions but in order. Now who else objects?" Everyone present was silent and looked at Lu Jianghe speechlessly. "You've already said that it's an order. How would they dare to object?" Lu Jianghe smiled proudly. Chu Xiu often said that. Now that he borrowed it, it felt pretty good. Lu Jianghe waved his hand, turned around and left with his men. However, when he reached the door, he turned back and looked at everyone with a serious expression. Just as everyone's heart skipped a beat, wondering what he was going to do next, Lu Jianghe said solemnly, "Don't forget that I am the Blood Sea Demon Lord, Lu Jianghe." After saying this, Lu Jianghe turned around and left with his men. Ling Yunzi struggled to get up from the ground. He was so angry that he was trembling. Lawless? This was simply lawless. What did Chu Xiu want to do? Recreate the ferocious might of the Kunlun Devil cult 500 years ago? Does he really think he's the overlord of the pugilistic world? Lu Changlu sighed and said, "Now that Chu Xiu is in the same realm as Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, there's no second founding master Ning Xuanji in the pugilistic world. If he's not the overlord of the pugilistic world, who is? However, compared to Dugu Weiwei, Chu Xiu is still considered good. At least he can leave a way out for the other pugilistic world members." Ling Yunzi's eyes widened. "He's threatening us to attack the Divine Gate. Is this considered leaving a way out for us?" Lu Changlu comforted him. "Don't be so extreme. Think about it. What if what Chu Xiu said is true? Once the Divine Gate's formation is broken, the upper realm's vitality will seep into the lower realm. Both of us will benefit. Although we're no longer young, we're not too old either. Maybe one day we can really reach the peak of the realm." Ling Yunzi frowned. "Do you believe that what Chu Xiu said is true?" Lu Changlu shook his head and said, I don't, but I only believe that Chu Xiu won't be so senseless. With Chu Xiu's strength and the power that the Kunlun Devil cult has now, even if he doesn't make up such an excuse, he can directly order us to attack the Divine Gate. So, since he said so now, it should be true. Hearing Lu Changliu's words, Ling Yunzi's face also showed a thoughtful expression. At this time in the Southern Man branch of the Kunlun Devil cult, when Eastern Qi, Western Chu, Northern Yin and Lu Fengxian's people all returned, Chu Xiu looked at the people present and said in a deep voice, "Announce to the world that 1 month later, we'll gather in Kunlun and attack the Divine Gate." At this moment in the Divine Gate of Kunlun, the 9 divine generals of the Divine Gate gathered in the main hall, but it was a mess and they were arguing non-stop. Although the martial artists of the Divine Gate rarely came out of the pugilistic world, they still had some people on the periphery who had built an intelligence network in the pugilistic world. Otherwise, the Divine Gate would have been blind, and they wouldn't even be able to distinguish the new forces in the pugilistic world. So, the news that Chu Xiu wanted to attack the Divine Gate was already known to them, but it was useless. Jun Wuxian had gone into seclusion, and he was the kind that couldn't be woken up. Jun Wuxian's main hall had its own formation. If he went into seclusion, no one would be able to wake him up from the outside world, and they could only barge into the formation. At this time Lin Songlong was walking back and forth in the main hall. Someone couldn't help but frown and say, "Lin Songlong, can you stop walking in circles? I'm dizzy because of you." Lin Songlong said angrily, "I don't want to walk either. But look at the situation outside now. Chu Xiu has joined forces with the pugilistic world to attack the Divine Gate. In an instant, the Divine Gate has become the target of public criticism. I think it won't be long before the Divine Gate no longer exists. Even if you want to faint, you won't be able to do so." Someone said disdainfully, "The Divine Gate has existed for tens of thousands of years. How can they destroy us just because they want to? Release all the people in the secret territory and fight them to the death. 2 fists can't fight 4 hands. Do you know how many people there are in the martial arts world of Eastern Qi, Northern Yin and West Chu?" Sigh, if we knew this would happen, we should have taken the opportunity when Dugu Weiwei wasn't around to completely annihilate the Kunlun Devil cult. That way the scourged Chu Xiu wouldn't have been left behind. The 9 great godly generals were in a mess, each of them sticking to their own views and saying all kinds of things. And among these people, Shui Wuli was arguing with them, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. He had been waiting for this day. At this time, Diwu Qisong, who was sitting at the head of the table, shouted angrily, "All of you shut up." When Jun Wuxian wasn't around, as the leader of the 9 great godly generals, Diwu Qisong could naturally suppress them. But the problem was, what was the use of suppressing them? Without Jun Wuxian he couldn't come up with any ideas or countermeasures. At this time Lin Songlong suddenly stood up and said, "Lord Diwu, the only thing we can do now is to wake the gate leader up. I will bear all the consequences. The Divine Gate has been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Other than 500 years ago, no one dared to challenge us, let alone invade us. Now that it has come to our generation, we naturally can't let it be destroyed by Chu Xiu." The entire Divine Gate knew that Lin Songlong could be said to be the most loyal to Jun Wuxian. His words really didn't contain any utilitarian thoughts. Diwu Qisong sighed and said, "Now that things have come to this, we can only do this." As he spoke, the 9 great godly generals of the Divine Gate went straight to the main hall where Jun Wuxian was in seclusion. Lin Songlong gritted his teeth and gathered the earth energy around him. A black dragon circled behind him. Just as he was about to attack Jun Wuxian's seclusion room and forcefully wake him up, the door of the seclusion room suddenly opened. Jun Wuxian walked out slowly and looked at the aggressive Lin Songlong. He frowned and said, "Why, are you thinking of rebelling?" Lin Songlong immediately dispersed the earth energy awkwardly. The next moment he looked at Jun Wuxian with a face full of surprise and said, "Gate leader, you have finally come out of seclusion. You don't know during this period of time, shut up." Jun Wuxian shouted at the agitated Lin Songlong and asked Diwu Qisong, "What is going on? I can feel that you guys are making a ruckus here even when I was in seclusion." Diwu Qisong quickly told Jun Wuxian everything that had happened in the underworld during this period of time in detail. After listening, Jun Wuxian's eyes suddenly revealed a strong murderous intent and a strange look. The murderous intent was because he really didn't expect that Chu Xiu would dare to attack the Divine Gate. The strange look was because he really didn't expect that Chu Xiu would dare to attack the Divine Gate. Although the words were the same, the meaning was completely different. One was anger, the other was doubt. Since Chu Xiu had stepped into the martial immortal realm, he should know the difference between them. Since that was the case, why would he dare to attack? Could it be that he knew that he was heavily injured? That's not right. No divine general of the divine gate could betray him. Even if he sensed the commotion in the Kunlun mountain range, how could he be sure that he was the one who was injured? Jun Wuxian definitely wouldn't have thought that the one who injured him was Chu Xiu. He had never forgotten about the Daluotian side. 10,000 years had passed. Although the divine gate knew more secrets than the lower realm, in reality they knew nothing about the Daluotian. Diwu Qisong said with a worried look, "Now Chu Xiu has begun to gather the power of the entire underworld to attack us. By then, there will be hundreds of forces and more than 100,000 warriors. It will be enough to surround the entire Kunlun mountain. Master, if we don't think of a way, I'm afraid the divine gate will have to experience another disaster from 500 years ago." Jun Wuxian said calmly, 500 years ago? Does Chu Xiu deserve to be compared to Dugu Weiwei? They haven't even reached your doorstep and you are already so flustered. Is this what I taught you before? The divine generals of the divine gate? Even 9 rats are more daring than you. Diwu Qisong and the other 8 blushed slightly. But they couldn't be blamed for such a thing. It was really too scary. No matter how confident and arrogant the warriors of the divine gate were, they weren't confident enough to challenge all the warriors in the underworld. Jun Wuxian waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about them. During this period of time, all of you will enter the palace where I am to cultivate. Remove all the outer array formations. If Elysium wants to attack them, let them." Hearing that Jun Wuxian was actually going to give up on the spell formations at the periphery, the 5th Qisong still wanted to persuade him, but Jun Wuxian said directly, "The spell formations that the Heavenly Gates has set up at the periphery are only responsible for stopping some of the warriors who have mistakenly entered Kunlun. Do you think that little bit of power can stop Chu Xiu?" This time Chu Xiu and the others had set up an overt plot. They had come to their doorstep so brazenly. No matter what kind of trap they had, it would be useless. Since that's the case, we might as well fight fair and square. When has our Heavenly Gate ever been afraid of anyone? Looking around, Jun Wuxian said in a deep voice, "Don't forget, the Heavenly Gates now is not the Heavenly Gates from 500 years ago. He is Chu Xiu and he is not Dugu Weiwei." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.